Chapter 1: The Fired Salesman. Chapter 1: The Fired Salesman. August 2014, Huangli Calendar. Zhongzhou City, capital of Yu Province, Huaguo, China. Do you have any idea how crucial this deal is for the company? How could you possibly be late at such a critical moment? What on earth were you thinking? Zhang Cheng, the department manager, berated intern Li Yueqi loudly through the phone. Mr. Zhang, please let me explain. There were unforeseen circumstances. When I took a taxi to Mr. Sun's house, the road was blocked due to a car accident. I called to explain to Mr. Sun, but he said he had already left home because of other commitments. He mentioned we could discuss this investment opportunity another time. Li Yueqi hastily explained. Talk later? What later? There are so many private equity firms in the country now. If you miss this chance, it's gone forever. Don't you get it? Enough talking. Just go handle your resignation paperwork. Don't bother coming in tomorrow. Zhang Cheng sneered. Li Yueqi pleaded in a desperate tone. Manager Zhang, I've already interned for over 40 days, and my performance has been consistently good. Just a few more days, and I can become a full-time employee. Could you please make an exception this once? There really was an unavoidable reason. I never expected to encounter a traffic jam caused by a car accident on my way here. Zhang Cheng said impatiently. No need to explain to me. Go explain it to the company's executives. With that, he hung up the phone. Li Yueqi was utterly dejected. As a recent finance graduate from Yuzhou University, he had stayed in Zhongzhou City, the provincial capital of Yuzhou, to seek employment. Originally, he had assumed that with his full-time undergraduate degree in finance, securing a position at a securities firm or insurance company would be the bare minimum, if not landing a coveted establishment position at a bank. After wandering around the job market for over a month, he discovered that the only available positions were either sales or business development roles, all demanding work experience and networking connections. Being a fresh graduate with no experience, he found the situation utterly unbearable. As the saying goes among friends, when fresh graduates first step into the job market, they think there's something special. After circling around for a while, they realize they're merely ordinary people. By the time they leave the job market, they discover they're not even qualified to be called ordinary anymore. But heaven won't starve a blind sparrow. At last, he was hired as a sales agent by a company called Zhongzhou Gaosheng Investment Consulting. The probation period lasted 2 months, with a monthly salary of 800 yuan during probation. After becoming a full-time employee, the salary rose to 1,200 yuan plus commissions, along with Social Security and 3 insurances plus 1 fund. This investment company called Gaosheng has absolutely no relation to that famous Goldman Sachs from America. It's just using the name to trick people. The entire firm, from top to bottom, only has about 20 people, and the work they take on has little to do with real investment. Their main job is to drum up clients for some public funds, brokerages, and private equity firms. Over the past year or so, the stock market had plunged to rock bottom, leaving the financial markets lifeless. Stock indices had retreated to levels around 2,000 points, and even the mention of stocks annoyed ordinary investors. Funds and private equity firms were struggling to survive. Various wealth management, public and private funds couldn't even meet their issuance quotas, so they outsourced client acquisition to so-called investment consulting firms like theirs. If they landed a deal, they got a cut. If not, they starved. For the past month or so, Li Yueqi had actually been doing fairly well. He kept telling his clients, the benchmark index is already hovering around 2,000 points now. How much lower can it go? The PE ratio of the CSI 300 is under 10, and stocks like ICBC are offering dividends as high as 10%. Those yields already beat every wealth management product on the market. How much further can the market drop? Look at what an amazing investment opportunity this is. Just the dividends alone would give you better returns than bank deposits or wealth management products. Our company's partners are all top-tier, prestigious institutions. Whether they're funds or private equity, now is the perfect time to invest. In short, despite the bull ******, he didn't even believe himself. A few clients actually coughed up money. His performance ranked among the top for interns in the company, and he was praised at every weekly meeting. At this rate, Li Yueqi was almost certain his promotion to a full-time position was in the bag. But today, a single instance of tardiness destroyed over 40 days of his hard work. He had already secured an agreement with Mr. Sun for 1 million yuan private investment, which the entire company had prioritized as it was the largest private placement quota they'd landed in the past month. Unlike public offerings, private placements came with higher commissions and greater profit sharing. His supervisor, Zhang Cheng, had publicly praised him multiple times during morning meetings for securing this deal, and while his colleagues showered him with compliments, he could detect traces of envy beneath their flattery. None of that bothered him, though. After all, the terms were already settled with Mr. Sunday. All that remained was to bring the contract, finalize the signing, and complete the transfer in one seamless process. Zhang Cheng had even promised him early regularization and commission payouts once the deal was signed. Never in his wildest dreams did he expect such a surefire deal to go awry. On his way to Mr. Sun's residence, the taxi he was in got caught in a car accident, trapping him on the overpass. Panicked, he dashed down the bridge while calling Mr. Sun to reassure him that he'd arrive immediately, simultaneously scanning a QR code to unlock a shared bike, planning to take backstreets to the Sun residence. Yet he was still 10 minutes late. By the time he arrived, the housekeeper informed him that Mr. Sun had left just 5 minutes prior. Frantically, Li Yueqi called Mr. Sun again, only to be told that he had business to attend to and had already flown from Zhengzhou to Rongqing. As for the investment matter, they could discuss it another time. In utter despair, he reported the situation to his supervisor, Zhang Cheng. To his surprise, Zhang Cheng, who had praised him multiple times before, immediately turned hostile and berated him mercilessly, thus leading to the scene described at the beginning. Upon hearing the news of his termination, Li Yueqi felt, for a moment, that his life had been a complete failure, a perpetual streak of bad luck since birth. He was born in a fifth-tier small town to parents who were ordinary factory workers. He had never been a standout student, failing his high school entrance exams after middle school. His father scraped together 50,000 yuan, savings accumulated over several years, to pay the additional fees required to barely secure him a spot at an average high school. When college entrance exams rolled around, he just managed to scrape past the minimum score for first-tier universities, barely qualifying for enrollment in the finance department at a provincial college. He thought entering university would turn his luck around, but with mediocre talents, he achieved nothing during college, except making a few friends and left with nothing to show for it. Romantic relationships, like having a girlfriend, were beyond imagination. 1 year before graduation, he took the civil service exam. Relying on his decent academic foundation, he ranked first in the written test, third in the interview, and second overall, securing a spot in the final selection. The position he applied for had 2 openings. Given his top written score and second place overall ranking, surely he would land the job, right? In the end, they hired a woman. Li Yueqi was furious and confronted the employer. The employer explained that they had originally planned to hire both a man and a woman for 2 positions. Since the top candidate was a man, they naturally opted for the top-ranked woman. Li Yueqi was the second-ranking male candidate, so he didn't meet their recruitment criteria. There was no other choice but to take on an internship. He believed that with hard work, he could land a decent job without having to take the civil service exam. Yet reality struck him again. After working for over 40 days at that investment firm called Gaosheng, he was unemployed once more, joining the masses searching for work. Chapter 2. The unreliable stock software. The next morning, Li Yueqi went to the company to complete his resignation procedures and pick up some personal belongings he had left there. People who had previously been polite and friendly now barely acknowledged him. This was only natural. Their earlier courtesy had been due to his professional competence and the hope that he might lend them a hand during tough times. Now that he had made a mistake and been forced to leave, they avoided him like the plague. As a seasoned loser, Li Yueqi knew all too well how others viewed those who failed. Just a few months earlier, when he had ranked first in the written exam for the civil service final recruitment, his parents had proudly shared the news in the family WeChat group. Relatives who hadn't visited for years suddenly flooded their house during the Lunar New Year, all fawning over how accomplished he was. Even the number of matchmakers introducing potential partners to him surged during his final winter break in university. But when the news spread that he wasn't hired simply because he wasn't a girl, the family group chat's attitude toward him, while not openly hostile, certainly lost its usual politeness. His parents also faced tremendous pressure during that time. Even among relatives, this was the case let alone with strangers. He didn't bother explaining anything to the company's executives. After being docked half a month's salary, Li Yueqi grabbed his belongings and a meager 900 yuan he'd earned from over 40 days of hard work, then left the office building. As for his colleagues, they had only crossed paths by chance to begin with, so naturally, no one saw him off. Li Yueqi planned to first bring his belongings back to his rental apartment before trying his luck at the job market. As a salesperson, he naturally wouldn't be bound by any non-compete agreements. If he could find a job, great. If not, he really had no idea how to explain it to his parents. Just 2 days earlier, Li Yueqi had called his mother to say he was doing well at work, meeting all his targets, and that the company had decided to formalize his employment ahead of schedule. Once he became a full-time employee, he'd start earning commissions and wouldn't need to ask his parents for money every month anymore. In just 2 short days, everything had changed. He remembered all too clearly how disappointed his parents had been when he failed to qualify for the civil service exam. He could still picture his father, not yet 50, suddenly looking years older overnight, his confidence when speaking to others noticeably diminished. He hated his own incompetence. The difference between him and the top candidate had been only 2 points. He hated himself for not scoring those extra 2 marks. If he'd ranked first overall, he surely wouldn't have been eliminated. But now he had to face reality. Taking the bus back to his rented room, he counted how much money he had left and calculated how long he could stay in Zhongzhou. Including the wages settled by his company, his Alipay and WeChat balances added up to just 2,100 yuan. Thankfully, he'd already paid 3 months rent up front and had barely lived there for 2 months, so housing wasn't an immediate concern. He still had a few $1,000s in the stock market. The company claimed that to do business, one must first gain experience, so they persuaded every new salesperson to open an account at a certain securities firm. After opening the account, Li Yueqi deposited all the 50,000 plus yuan he had saved into it for trading. The result? While he could eloquently explain to others how great the current investment opportunities were when pitching investments, his own stock trading was a complete mess. In just over a month, his 50,000 yuan had lost 30%, leaving him with only around 35,000 yuan. With such a small amount, there were times when he couldn't even afford to buy a single lot of stocks, meaning he didn't even meet the threshold to participate in certain stock trades. Since the loss wasn't significant anyway, he stopped worrying about it, uninstalled the stock analysis software, and focused on work and sales. He only checked the daily market trends before going to bed at night. But now, he had to calculate all his assets. If necessary, he would sell his stocks and withdraw the money from the market to get through the immediate crisis. His Mi 3 phone was a gift his father had bought him a few months ago after learning he had ranked first in the written exam. In the end, however, the gift failed to live up to the giver's expectations. Well, no point dwelling on it. He'd just have to work harder in the future. Since he had previously uninstalled the stock analysis software, choosing to lie low and wait for a bull market, he was too beaten down to fight back. He now had to download one again. Only by pairing it with his brokerage's software could he analyze a decent selling point for the next day and see how much he could recover. Earlier, when he opened his brokerage app, he discovered that the 1,000 shares of Ely Holdings he'd bought over half a month ago had grown to 1,500 shares after stock dividends and rights adjustments. Moreover, the stock had surged remarkably in the past few weeks, now sitting at 27 yuan, giving him a 20% profit on this position. At least some of his previous losses had been recouped. He decided to sell his Ely Holdings shares the next day to get through his current crisis. So, Li Yueqi planned to download a stock analysis tool for market tracking. But when he clicked open the damage shop, his phone suddenly froze, though this was perfectly normal behavior for a Dami phone. Despite the Dami 3's claim of being the world's fastest Android phone at the time, it regularly suffered from bizarre glitches, freezing, crashing, screen flickering, connection drops, all par for the course. After all, for 1,999 yuan, you couldn't expect much. The solution was simple enough. Just hold down the power and volume buttons to restart it. After rebooting, Li Yueqi noticed that when he searched for market software, he was recommended an app called Yida Market Viewer, which offered a free 1-year service upon download. He knew this so-called service was just 10-level market depth and per trade details, essentially expanding the standard 5-level trading display to 10 levels and showing every transaction at each price point. When he'd opened his account at Zhongxin Securities, he'd been given 3 months of this service for free. He thought it was pretty useless. He still lost money regardless. But driven by the principle of take freebies when you can, he promptly downloaded and installed Yida Market Viewer. Once he opened the app, Li Yueqi was stunned. The stock names matched, but the charts were completely different from what he saw on websites. He distinctly remembered today's market index hovering around 2,200 points, but here it showed 3,750. Frantically, he clicked into his Ely Holdings stock details and saw the day's opening price had dropped from 26 yuan to 17 yuan, and the current price had also fallen from 27 yuan to 17. Li Yueqi was furious, convinced he had downloaded a scam app. Even stock market analysis software had counterfeit versions nowadays. But considering the prevalence of telecom fraud in society, it wasn't entirely surprising. Just as he was about to uninstall the software and download it again, he accidentally glanced at the date displayed on the interface. The software showed August 5th, 2015, but today was clearly August 5th, 2014. A wave of overwhelming dread washed over him. Had downloading this app somehow sent him back in time? Not just back in time, but a full year into the future? Chapter 3. The First Stock Purchase Experiment. Chapter 3. The First Stock Purchase Experiment, however, this panic fear didn't last long. Li Yueqi checked his phone's home screen, which still displayed the date as August 5th, 2014. The belongings he had just brought back from the company were still around him. Opening the trading software, the date clearly showed August 5th, 2014, and Ely Holdings stock price was at 17 yuan. He realized he'd probably been scammed by pirated software and cursed inwardly. Just my damn luck? Even pirated software screws me over? Yet his eyes lingered on that program called Yida Market Analyzer. Strangely, it showed the market index peaking at 5,178 points on June 12th the following year, before plunging to around 3,700. Li Yueqi smirked cynically. These sketchy developers spin taller tales than I do. Classic investment fund tactics. Hype an imaginary bull market first, then reel in the suckers. Since he had nothing better to do, he figured he might as well see how accurate this software's predictions really were. He swiped the screen, dragging the date axis to August 5th, 2014, the present day. The chart clearly displayed that day's opening at 2,224 points, peaking at 2,226, bottoming at 2,206, and closing at 2,219, an overall 0.8% decline. Every movement before August 5th perfectly matched the actual market trends. A wild possibility struck him. What if these charts were real? What if they showed the next year's trajectory? Yueqi shook his head. This required verification. He decided to cancel all plans and hole up in his rented apartment to monitor stocks. Validating Yida Analyzer's accuracy could mean a monumental opportunity, a life-altering turning point. So he decided to stay in his rented apartment to monitor the stock market today instead of going out. Finding a job could wait a couple more days. He then devoted the entire day to watching the market movements, verifying his luck in real time. During the 2-hour midday trading halt, he didn't even go out for lunch, just boiled some water and settled for instant noodles. He kept watching until around 2:50 p.m., feeling it was about time for the day's outcome to settle. Checking the day's trend line, he saw the market's peak was indeed at 2,226 points and the low at 2,206, completely matching the prediction. Suddenly remembering his Ely shares, he quickly checked and found the high and low prices were also spot on. But there was a 4% drop for Ely Corporation on August 6th. He hesitated, debating whether to verify it for another day. After all, unlike predicting the numbers, every move now involved real money. But his hesitation lasted only a moment. With the market about to close, he gritted his teeth and sold all 1,500 shares he held after a 10-4-5 stock split, locking in his profits. The next day, August 6th, at 9:15 in the morning, he opened the software again and saw that Ely shares, which he had sold the previous day, indeed opened lower and continued to decline throughout the day, ultimately dropping by 4%. As for the broader market, Just as the software had indicated, the day's highest and lowest points matched the predictions exactly, with an overall decline of 0. After 2 consecutive days of accurate verification, Liuechi's skepticism toward the software began to fade. However, he still couldn't quite believe it was real. After all, scams that tailored different fake results to different individuals before delivering the final blow weren't unheard of. He decided to conduct one last test by simultaneously analyzing the indices of all 4 major boards: Shanghai, Shenzhen, the Small and Medium Enterprise Board, and the Growth Enterprise Market, along with the intraday fluctuations of all stocks listed in the CSI 300 index. If the predictions still matched perfectly, he would truly accept that fortune had smiled upon him. He refused to believe that Yida software could possibly manipulate the movements of all 4 boards and every single stock in the CSI 300. If a scam ring could actually pull off something that massive, he figured he might as well swallow the loss. Getting tricked by such a masterful operation would almost be an honor. Liuechi, whose skepticism about the software had somewhat diminished, decided to take a gamble. He first selected Zhongke Xinyue, the stock with the largest price fluctuation limit up on August 8th. The so-called largest fluctuation meant the widest gap between the highest and lowest prices, allowing for higher profits by buying at the lowest price. The price chart showed that Zhongke Xinyue experienced a dramatic rebound from limit down to limit up that day. Buying at the lowest price would yield a 20% profit, and he also noticed the stock would continue to hit 3 consecutive limit ups in the following days. August 8th was a Friday, meaning by the following Wednesday, he could achieve around a 60% return. However, since the software only displayed the price chart, Liuechi didn't know when the stock would hit the lowest price, nor did he want to take the risk of losing everything. Therefore, after the market opened, he used only half of his position, placing an order for 1,000 shares at 25 yuan, 1 cent above the limit down price. Sure enough, after the opening, the stock plummeted. By around 10 a.m., it had hit the 25 yuan limit down, and his order for 1,000 shares was filled. The stock forum was flooded with angry rants, as frustrated traders vented their frustrations. I knew this stock was shady. With such terrible performance, how could it be priced so high? It deserves to hit the daily limit down. Opened at 27 and ran. Took a 3 yuan loss. See you below 20? Junk stock? No explanation needed. Yesterday, there was news that the boss of Zhongke Xinyue gambled away the company's money at a casino. Not sure if it's true, but I suggest the village chief look into it. Deeply trapped in this position, no idea when I can catch a break. Monday I'll hit the limit down and get out. On the forum, all sorts of rumors, both true and false, were flying around wildly. Everyone spoke with such convincing detail, but Liuechi knew that taking such messages seriously would only lead to defeat. Truthfully, Liuechi was also extremely nervous. Although he had bet half his fortune on this stock, he couldn't be certain whether his software was truly reliable. If he lost this gamble, the loss would be devastating. By the noon market close, the limit down sell orders had expanded further, piling up to over 100,000 lots. 1 lot equals 100 shares, so 100,000 lots equates to over 10 million shares. The stock's total float was only 45 million shares, meaning the sell orders at the limit down price already accounted for a quarter of its circulating supply. At this moment, Liuechi was utterly tormented. Once again, he skipped lunch, determined to wait for the final outcome. At 1:30 p.m., when the stock market reopened, Zhongke Xinyue sell-off orders were still piling up. Liuechi grew increasingly anxious. Then, just before 1:30 p.m., a massive buy order for 10,000 lots shattered the stock stagnation. More enormous buy orders followed, and within 30 seconds, the stock reversed from its limit-down position and launched straight upward. Though there were minor fluctuations along the way, the entire surge lasted barely a minute. In the blink of an eye, Zhongke Xinyue rocketed from limit down to limit up. Shortly after, over 200,000 lots of buy orders at the limit up price sealed the stock firmly at 30 yuan. Just today's surge alone had earned him a floating profit of around 5,500 yuan, higher than his 4 months base salary. This was the allure of speculation, the magic of finance. Sitting idly until the stock market closed, Zhongke Xinyue showed no signs of trading activity. Li Yueqi's heart raced with excitement as he realized the significance of the software in his hands. The 5,500 yuan floating profit he gained today was just the beginning. What truly awaited him might be an entire era. Chapter 4: Changing Houses. Chapter 4: Changing accommodations. After the stock market closed, it took Li Yueqi quite a while to calm his emotions. He knew that although he had stumbled upon great luck, whether he could make the best use of it remained uncertain. Still, having earned at least 5,500 yuan in today's trading session, he decided to reward himself first. After all, the mounting pressure over the past few days had left him utterly anxious. But with the money in the stock market temporarily inaccessible, he found himself still holding only about 2,000 yuan in cash. He decided to treat himself that evening at Hanjigong, the most popular Korean barbecue buffet in the urban village where he lived. Poor future master speculator. How pathetic that he considered a 49 yuan per person barbecue joint a rewarding treat. Just thinking about it tugs at the heartstrings. Yet Li Yueqi himself hardly noticed this irony. Born to the proletariat, a single barbecue meal had cost him what would have covered 1 or 2 days of food before. To him, this was already an extravagance. Since graduating from college, this was only the second time he'd tasted such a 49 yuan barbecue. More importantly, he hadn't eaten anything all day. This meal satisfied both his cravings and his hunger, plus it didn't taste half bad. What could be better? Haha. Finally finishing up the barbecue buffet, Li Yueqi walked away, contentedly munching on an apple, having truly achieved the legendary pinnacle of buffet dining, entering while leaning on the wall and leaving clinging to it. Under the disdainful gazes of the waitstaff, he exited the all-you-can-eat restaurant. He had finally eaten back every last bit of his lost money. That evening, Li Yueqi received an investment risk alert via WeChat from his brokerage. The Zhongkexinyu stock he held had won a major 1.7 billion yuan project bid. Knowing everything was now solid, he felt assured. Over the weekend, Li Yueqi still didn't go out. Being broke, there was hardly anything worth buying. Using his Yida stock analysis software, he picked several stocks with significant intraday volatility and strong post-limit up fluctuations, planning to buy them when the market reopened on Monday. Another week passed, and by Wednesday, Li Yueqi sold all his Zhongkexinyu shares at their peak before executing several more trades. Finally, on Thursday, August 14th, his account balance breached 6 figures, reaching 120,000 yuan. He decided to withdraw 20,000 first to find a more reliable place to live, while the rest would go toward improving his daily life. The next day, Friday, the 20,000 cash arrived. Brokerage transfers take a day to process. He couldn't help but reflect. Just 10 days ago, he had been completely penniless, but now he possessed over 100,000 in assets. Though it paled in comparison to the wealth of trust fund kids or even middle-class earners, for him, it marked a promising new beginning. In the morning, he traded another stock that hit its daily limit up, so he left it alone by noon. At midday, he went out for a Korean barbecue. In the afternoon, he planned to find a larger and more reliable apartment since the weather was scorching. Although his small place had air conditioning, the noisy environment and poor soundproofing made it quite uncomfortable to live in. However, his cash reserves were still limited, so he couldn't afford anything too upscale. He started by searching online for available rentals. A 2-bedroom, around 80 square meters, preferably in a high-rise with an elevator, short-term lease of about 2 months, fully furnished, and ideally with monthly rent payments. Naturally, such specific short-term rentals were hard to find. After much deliberation, he settled on a nearby homestay. Naturally, the price wasn't cheap, but Li Yueqi wasn't short on money now. After negotiating with the owner, he rented it for a month. Once the homestay was secured, Li Yueqi called his landlord, explaining that he had successfully passed his probation period and received a housing subsidy from the company, so he intended to move closer to work. Since Li Yueqi had never missed rent, the landlord didn't give him trouble either. After a quick check of the apartment, the landlord offered to settle the rent and refund based on the actual months lived. With only a few days left until the end of the second month, there was no point haggling over such a small amount. Li Yueqi readily agreed to the monthly settlement. A clean break. Everyone had their own future to pursue. Li Yueqi had been virtually penniless before, so he barely had any decent belongings. He packed lightly, grabbed his suitcase, and headed to the homestay he'd rented earlier. He actually liked the vibe of the urban village. The homestay wasn't too far from his old place, just a 10-minute walk. By the time he arrived, the owner was already waiting for him at the door. To his surprise, the owner of this homestay turned out to be a woman in her 20s. Secretly comparing himself to her, he felt ashamed. At her age, she was already running a homestay business. If not for that stock prediction software that could foresee the future, he would never be able to match up to her. The group wasn't familiar with each other, so there wasn't much small talk. After registering their IDs, paying the deposit and rent, and going over a few house rules, the female boss left. Before leaving, however, they exchanged WeChat contacts. The female boss's name was quite lovely, Ling Qingxin. Li Yueqi moved into the homestay with his luggage and inspected the place. It was a 2-bedroom apartment in a residential complex, about 70 square meters with a small balcony. Outside the apartment complex was the urban village where he had previously lived. Though it got a bit noisy in the mornings and evenings, he enjoyed the lively atmosphere. Most importantly, he was already well acquainted with the nearby food spots, like that Korean barbecue place. Regardless, you get what you pay for. The living conditions were worlds apart from before. Having a proper suite also meant he could cook for himself when he had time, take daily showers, and live something closer to a normal life. After moving, Li Yueqi received an unexpected call from his former classmate and roommate Zhang Yifei, inviting him out for a gathering if he had time. This roommate wasn't a local. He hailed from the northern part of Yuzhou. As the second eldest in their dorm, while Li Yueqi ranked third. After graduation, much like Li Yueqi, Zhang had struggled for a while before landing a job as a company clerk. He often vented in their WeChat group about how difficult their bosses were to please. However, Li Yueqi wasn't one to boast, so he kept much of what had happened to himself to avoid drawing attention. His friends still believed he was pulling deals at that Golden Victory investment firm. By evening, Li Yueqi arrived early at the barbecue stall where they had agreed to meet. Seated there, he idly scrolled through his phone. When Zhang Yifei arrived, Li Yueqi cleared a spot for him and ordered some skewers and beer, the same favorites they used to indulge in whenever their dorm brothers treated themselves to a better meal. While waiting for Zhang Yifei, Li Yueqi called his parents. Of course, he only shared the good news, that he had switched jobs and that his new boss greatly valued him. Thanks to the resources he brought to the table, the employer had even agreed to a starting salary of 3,000 yuan right off the bat. He reassured his parents that he had rented a new place and even sent them photos of the neatly furnished room to set their minds at ease. His mother, glancing at her son's new living arrangements, didn't doubt his words. In her mind, he remained that honest boy who never lied. Little did she know just how brutally the fiercely competitive workplace had, in just a few short months, ground that once truthful boy into a polished, unflinching liar of the corporate world. Chapter 5: Opportunities of the Future. Just as he was lying to his mom, Zhang Yifei, his second bunkmate, had already arrived at the food stall. Listening to Li Yueqi's rambling nonsense, Zhang Yifei winked at him. Finally hanging up the phone, Li Yueqi shot his friend a look that plainly said, "We're in the same boat, don't throw stones." Li Yueqi ordered dozens of skewers and a few bottles of beer. Soon enough, the vendor brought lamb and kidneys to their table. Zhang Yifei skewered a piece of meat while complaining, "Third brother, did you get that full-time position? Why are you still living near this urban village? Isn't the commute to work a hassle every day?" Li Yueqi chuckled and said, "Nope, I quit." Zhang Yifei exclaimed in surprise, "Quit? What are you going to live on without a job?" Li Yueqi replied, "I'll eat whatever I can, just not losses. I'm done catering to those entitled bosses. But enough about me, how about you? How's everything on your end?" Zhang Yifei continued venting, "It's no better. Office clerk work has no technical requirements. Just typing and filing documents. Anyone can do it, and there's no room for advancement. But since you've quit that job, what's your next move? From what I heard you telling your mom, you definitely don't plan to go back home. Have you found a new company yet?" Zhang Yifei continued asking. Li Yueqi shook his head. "I'll cross that bridge when I come to it. I still have a bit of savings, so no hurry yet." Zhang Yifei said, "Then resigning was a bit impulsive of you. Changing jobs is fine, but you should at least secure the next one first." Those bastards made me their scapegoat. How am I supposed to keep working like this? Li Yueqi complained bitterly. Zhang Yifei let out a long sigh and said, "Third brother, I might be going back home by the end of this month too. This job really has no future. I don't have any special skills, so I can't compete for better positions. My dad wants me to go back and help out at our family's hotel." Back when they were in college, Li Yueqi had visited northern Henan with Zhang Yifei and knew his friend's family ran a restaurant called the Hengshui Grand Hotel, named after a nearby river called Hengshui. The hotel wasn't small. It had 2 floors and employed over a dozen chefs and waitstaff. So by most standards, Zhang Yifei could be considered a moderately wealthy second-generation heir. But young people often have their rebellious streaks. After graduating, Zhang Yifei hadn't returned home to take over the family business, insisting instead on staying in Zhongzhou to make his own way. After struggling to land an office clerk position and enduring just over 2 months of the harsh realities of working life, he was ready to face the facts and go home peacefully to inherit the family enterprise. Back in 217 dormitory, the 4 brothers who had lived together for 4 years saw very different paths after graduation. The eldest returned to his hometown straight away and landed a job as a bank clerk. Surprisingly, it was the youngest who did the best. He and Li Yueqi had both taken the civil service exam at the same time, but he secured a position at a county tax bureau in Rongqing, earning himself an iron rice bowl. He had already left Zhongzhou City long ago. Now, even the second oldest was leaving Li Yueqi as the only one still struggling to make his way. If not for the stroke of luck that brought him that stock analysis software, he probably would have slunk back home in shame 2 weeks earlier. The dreams of those years ultimately couldn't withstand the torment of reality, and all the fiery passions of youth dissipated into thin air after enduring those blows. Without another word, Li Yueqi picked up a glass of beer, clinked it against Zhang Yifei's, and downed it in one gulp. Everything lies in silence. The next day was Saturday, and Li Yueqi decided to buy a new phone. It wasn't that his old Xiaomi 3 was unusable, but he wanted better security. After all, his Yida stock analysis software was far too valuable. All his hopes and future depended on it. There couldn't be even the slightest mishap. After browsing around the phone store for a while, Li Yueqi settled on a Huawei flagship smartphone. The metal body, fingerprint sensor, and 6-inch screen all screamed luxury. He had coveted this phone for a long time, but online, it was always sold out at retail price, while physical stores had it readily available for a 1,000 yuan markup. Though paying inflated prices and lining scalpers' pockets annoyed him, the current Li Yueqi couldn't be bothered to care about such petty expenses anymore. After purchasing the phone, Li Yueqi didn't linger in the city, but returned straight to his rented apartment to test it. To confirm the results, he simultaneously bought an anonymous prepaid SIM card. Before 2017, many prepaid cards required no ID registration. After powering on the device, downloading, installing, and configuring everything, Li Yueqi opened a reinstalled Yida stock analysis app. As usual, it prompted him with an ad offering a free year of service upon registration. But this time, after registering with his new number, he discovered that the free service only offered basic 10-level market data and tick-by-tick quotes, without any of the future market trend predictions. Then, Li Yueqi logged in again using his previous phone number on the new phone, and the Yida stock analysis software on this device also displayed the stock trends for the upcoming year, while the Yida stock analysis on his Mi 3 phone reverted to showing regular market trends. Just as he had suspected, the future stock chart was tied to his phone number, not the phone itself. This put his mind at ease significantly. Still, to prevent any mishaps, Li Yueqi opened a recharge app and topped up his old number with 10,000 yuan in credit, enough to keep his plan active for a decade without interruption. With these worries resolved, Li Yueqi felt at ease. He then began analyzing the future trend lines. It was already late August 2014, and the lines indicated that within the next year, China's stock market would experience an unprecedented bull market. The overall market would double in just a few months, with many individual stocks soaring several-fold or even dozens of times. This would be his best opportunity to achieve financial freedom. Missing it would make his future path much more difficult. Although he could chase daily limit ups through the trend lines, His current trading volume was small, making him inconspicuous to institutions and hot money traders. But once his capital grew to tens of millions or even hundreds of millions, attempting to quietly profit from existing setups might prompt major players to change their strategies, potentially altering the predicted outcome of the lines. Thus, his best approach was to ride this bull market wave. With the market's overall momentum supporting his trades, his path to wealth will be steadier and less noticeable. After all, during a bull market, everyone is making money. If someone earns more, others would simply attribute it to good luck. His current capital was far from sufficient. Before the bull market fully took off, he needed to grow his funds rapidly to complete his initial accumulation as soon as possible. At the same time, margin trading could also be used, but the threshold requires at least 500,000 yuan, far beyond his current capital. Using off-exchange leverage carries significant risks too. There's even a chance of not receiving the profits even after making money. Therefore, the best approach is to quickly grow his capital to over 500,000 yuan, making it easier to apply for margin financing with securities firms. And so, Li Yueqi's new round of wealth explosion plan began. Chapter 6 Real Market Maneuvering. Chapter 6 Real Market Operations. A new week began. The stock Jianghua Electromechanical, which Li Yueqi had purchased the previous Friday, opened 3% higher due to positive news. He watched and waited, knowing there would be a buying opportunity today. According to the charts, after the initial surge, the stock would be driven down, purposely suppressed, plunging close to the daily limit down before rebounding with a long lower shadow. Eventually, it would close at the daily limit up price. Li Yueqi had long noticed the limitations of the line chart. It could only display 4 indicators: the opening price, closing price, highest price, and lowest price at his current time. Other crucial metrics like trading volume, transaction amounts, and the specific intraday price movements were nowhere to be seen. Even with future line charts in hand, he could only capitalize on price swings rather than effectively lowering his cost basis. The risks were simply too great. Missing a single crucial move could wipe out all potential gains from that stock. The chart of Jianghua Electromechanical shows that after forming a long lower shadow today, it will experience consecutive upward movements, rising by 38% in a week. This is a rare blue-chip stock in recent times. But Li Yueqi still wanted to take a gamble, because today's market shakeout presented an opportunity too good to miss. However, he wasn't sure how long the morning rally would last, so he decided not to wait any longer. He opened the trading software and liquidated his entire position mid-rally at a 4% markup. Then, he placed a buy order just 1 cent above that day's lowest price and waited patiently. Sure enough, Jianghua Electromechanical, after surging violently by 7% in the morning, suddenly reversed direction. Massive sell orders flooded in, creating the impression that the major players were dumping their shares. By midday close, the stock had already plummeted from its 7% gain to a negative position. On the forums, countless traders who had chased the rally today were loudly cursing, while many retail investors who had bought earlier declared they would sell immediately at the afternoon's opening. When the afternoon session opened, Jianghua Electromechanical plummeted even faster, dropping straight to the point within 15 minutes, where Li Yueqi's buy order from the morning session had already been filled. Countless sell orders poured out frantically, and retail investors were dumping their shares outright. The stock began fluctuating near this level, with 3 attempts to hit the lower limit, each time prompting even more eager selling from retail traders. But then, starting at 2:35 p.m., a series of large buy orders came crashing in, overwhelming countless small investors. In just 10 minutes, the stock surged rapidly, making repeated appearances on the short-term alerts. By 2:51 p.m., Jianghua Electromechanical hit the upper limit again and was sealed tightly with a massive 700,000 lot buy order. In just one day, the market manipulators behind Jianghua Electromechanical delivered a brutal lesson in the realities of capital markets, raising prices, shaking out small traders, and harvesting profits at the upper limit, all in one seamless sweep. The turnover rate for the day reached an astounding 35%, wiping out the wealth of countless retail investors as blood-stained chips were ruthlessly collected by the big players. This is the raw truth of capital markets, the unvarnished story that plays out in the stock market every single day. After the market closed, Li Yueqi's emotions took a long time to settle. Even in the sweltering late August heat of Zhongzhou, with the AC in his rented apartment cranked to maximum, his heart felt icy cold. If he hadn't possessed that glimpse of the future's price chart, he too would have been just another casualty of this ruthless harvest, his mindset utterly defenseless against such brutality. But for Li Yueqi, today was another day of rich gains. 2 trades within a single session had brought him a staggering 27% profit. This was precisely the intoxicating allure of trading in such a market. Meanwhile, the stock forum for Jianghua Electromechanical was in complete upheaval. Many small retail investors got slaughtered, surrendering their bloody chips near the lowest prices, only to be forced to chase the rebound at higher levels. Fellow traders were spewing curses. Damn, today's shakeout was absolutely brutal. I gotta hand it to them. In just one trading session, my position shrank from 8,000 shares to 6,500. What a goddamn scam. The guy above at least got lucky. He still caught the limit up somehow. I got wrecked, sold an 8% drop, then chicken out when it rallied. This stock's been on a tear lately, yet somehow I lost money. Absolute BS. Whatever, those who chase today shouldn't celebrate too soon. Who knows what crap this stock will pull tomorrow? When you're up against ruthless market makers, you've got to take the L. 35% turnover rate. Aside from the controlling shareholders, hasn't the entire float practically changed hands by now? Yes, the trading volume and turnover rate are incredibly high. Is the old manipulator exiting? New players entering? Or some bombshell news incoming? For such high turnover, trending stocks, news factors often outweigh technical indicators these days. Let's wait for the evening announcements. Li Yueqi silently observed the various speculations and comments from his fellow traders. He had never been one to seek the limelight, especially when it involved secrets that couldn't be shared. He handled such matters with extreme caution. Though he enjoyed reading others' posts, he never contributed himself. Li Yueqi knew he was still a small player. While no secret could stay hidden forever in this world, and his high-frequency trade with extraordinary returns would inevitably be exposed someday, he hoped that day would come as late as possible. By then, he wished to possess sufficient means of self-protection to avoid being at others' mercy. Whether in stock trading or other financial investments, discipline and mental fortitude matter far more than analyzing and judging market indicators. Human nature has remained unchanged for millennia. Our modern, prosperous civilization was built on humanity's craving for wealth, an impulse infinitely amplified by capital markets, along with humanity's inherent weaknesses. Greed, fear, cowardice, these instincts are deeply etched into our DNA. A select few exploit these instincts to profit in capital markets. Anyone exposed to the stock market feels this profoundly, yet none can overcome the human nature carved into their genes. Under the sway of these weaknesses, most people are harvested like leeks by capital, again and again. As Li Yueqi read his fellow traders' posts, he found himself lost in contemplation, marveling at the nature of humanity. In the following days, Li Yueqi didn't continue aggressive trading like that day. Instead, he waited patiently for profits to ripen and then liquidated his position in Jianghua Electromechanical at the highest price. Over 6 trading days, just 1 week, his gains reached 50%, while the stock itself had only risen 38% during the same period. Over the next while, he repeatedly followed a similar approach, flipping several comparable stocks back and forth. By the end of September, the cash in his hands finally surpassed 500,000 yuan, achieving the goal he had set earlier. From August 8th, when Li Yueqi first obtained the futures line graph, until now, barely 50-odd days had passed, just over 30 trading sessions. Yet his stock market capital had surged from around 30,000 yuan to 500,000 yuan, multiplying his wealth by more than 13 times. Performance like this was impossible not to catch the attention of those who were watching. Perhaps an average person wouldn't easily notice, but to a securities firm, every one of his moves was completely transparent. Nothing could remain secret. Chapter 7. Someone's watching him. While Li Yueqi was still exhilarated by his soaring wealth, certain perceptive individuals had already taken notice of him. Inside the general manager's office at Zhongxin Securities, the brokerage where Li Yueqi had opened his account. Manager Gao, I've identified an unusual trading account, a client manager reported to his superior. Oh, let me see, what's the anomaly? Manager Gao asked curiously. The account holder's name is Li Yueqi, 22 years old, single, and a recent college graduate this year. He opened an account with our company in early June, and I am his account manager. At first, for over a month, this client was like any ordinary retail investor, chasing rallies and selling off in panic, showing no signs of abnormality. His initial capital of 50,000 yuan dwindled to 30,000. But in the past month or so, this client has been performing as if he hacked the system, accurately picking the stocks with the highest gains within a given period every time. He consistently buys near the lows and sells near the peaks with astonishing precision, always timing the market perfectly. In just 35 trading days, his capital has surged from 30,000 to around 500,000 yuan, achieving a staggering return of 13 times. Such performance is practically unheard of. Fortunately, his capital scale is still small. Otherwise, he would have already caught the attention of other firms or higher authorities. The account manager continued reporting. Has he activated margin trading? Is he using leverage? Or is there any suspicious illegal activity? Manager Gao asked in shock. No, he didn't have sufficient funds to activate margin trading, and he had no previous trading records, just a complete novice entering the market fresh. There were no irregularities in his operations either. Everything was compliant and legal. That's exactly why I was so shocked and felt compelled to report the situation to you. The account manager continued his response. All right, I understand. Send someone to gather information on this Li Yueqi, his background, resume, communication records, and methods of external contact. His current capital volume isn't significant yet, so monitor him for now. Keep observing for a while longer to see if any other anomalies arise. Report back to me immediately if anything comes up. Manager Gao issued his final directives. Our protagonist had no idea he was already being watched. Today, he planned to visit his brokerage firm, Zhongxin Securities, to apply for margin trading services. In reality, opening a margin account requires 6 months of prior account history, but we'll overlook that detail for the sake of the story. Otherwise, there'd be nothing to write about. At 3 p.m. after the market closed, Li Yueqi arrived at Zhongxin Securities and was warmly received by his account manager. Since he had originally opened his account online, he had never actually met his manager in person. At most, they had exchanged a few casual messages in the WeChat group managed by her. Li Yueqi's account manager was a young woman in her 20s named Wei Yaij. Her speech, demeanor, and overall conduct exuded a polished shrewdness, light years ahead of the amateurish customer service manager from that fly-by-night company he had previously worked for. Wei Yaij flashed a professional smile and said, Mr. Li, we've chatted many times in the group, but today must be our first face-to-face meeting. May I ask what brings you to our headquarters today? Li Yueqi got straight to the point without beating around the bush. Oh, it's like this. My capital has reached 500,000 yuan, and I'd like to apply for margin trading services. That's why I'm here today. Wei Yaij had actually thoroughly studied all of Li Yueqi's information beforehand. It was she who had prepared the report for Manager Gao that morning. However, she showed no sign of this, and instead carefully reviewed the documents Li Yueqi had filled out before saying, Mr. Li, although your capital meets the requirement, your account has been open for less than 3 months, and your investment experience doesn't meet the standard. Therefore, we can't approve your margin trading application for now. Understand. Actually, I've been using my mother's account for trading all along, so I'm already quite experienced with investments, and I'm fully aware of the relevant risks. Please help me get it approved, Li Yueqi stated seriously, spinning his blatant fabrication with a straight face. While regulations must be complied with, securities firms in reality always maintain flexible ethical boundaries. After all, nobody in this world would spit on money. Fortunately, margin trading and securities lending operations haven't been fully rolled out yet, and management remains relatively lenient. Once restrictions on these services tighten, such maneuvers won't be so easy to pull off. Wei Yaij showed no signs of refusal either, merely stating she needed to seek approval from higher-ups. She then fetched Li Yueqi a cup of coffee, asking him to wait while she reported the application to her superiors. Wei Yaij went straight to the general manager's office. Normally, account managers rarely get direct access to the GM, and routine operations like opening margin trading accounts certainly wouldn't require the attention of Zhongxin Securities' regional head for Central China. But since Manager Gao had emphasized immediate reporting about Li Yueqi's activities, Wei Yaij could bypass normal channels to contact the GM directly. Upon hearing this morning's mysterious figure had arrived at their offices in the afternoon, the general manager Gao immediately decided to meet him personally, both to assess what exactly made this individual noteworthy and to gather concrete information about him through direct interaction. So Manager Gao personally came to the business negotiation room and met with Li Yueqi accompanied by Wei Yaij. The other salespeople and department managers were all very surprised, not knowing what was going on. Just what kind of client could warrant a personal meeting with the regional general manager of Zhongxin Securities in the Zhongzhou area? But since they were all seasoned professionals, though somewhat startled, they didn't show much of a reaction. Mr. Li, apologies for the wait. This is Manager Gao from our company. Please discuss your specific requirements with him. Wei Yaij introduced to Li Yueqi but didn't reveal Gao's true position, simply referring to him as a manager. After all, nowadays, every company has more managers than there are dogs. Just about anyone can be called manager. Li Yueqi observed Manager Gao, probably in his 30s, sharp and capable, exuding the commanding presence of someone long accustomed to authority. His clothes were of high quality, and the name tag on his chest bore only one name, Gao Fenghua. Manager Gao, in turn, was sizing up Li Yueqi. With a faint smile, he asked, "Mr. Li, you wish to open a margin trading account, correct? Are you familiar with the relevant regulations?" Li Yueqi responded, "I'm fully aware of the risks. Ms. Wei here has explained it to me multiple times. Of course, I understand the risks involved, and I have ample investment experience. I've been using my mother's account to invest for quite some time now. If you really can't proceed with this, then I'll have no choice but to inquire at other companies." Watching Li Yueqi eagerly revealing what he thought was his trump card, Gao Fenghua had a rough idea in mind. Without refusing, he went straight to the point. Regulations are indeed important, but some things can be flexible. May I ask how much leverage Mr. Li wishes to apply for? Li Yueqi said directly, "Of course, the higher the better, preferably 10 times or more." Gao Fenghua said calmly, "A 10-fold leverage is too high risk. My personal authority isn't sufficient. The highest I can approve for you, Mr. Li, is 5-fold leverage. Anything beyond that would exceed my decision-making power." Li Yueqi thought for a moment and nodded in agreement, saying, "All right, 5 times it is." "Very well. Miss Wei, please assist Mr. Li with setting up the margin trading account." "Mr. Li, please wait here for a moment. I have some work to attend to, so I must excuse myself for now. If you need anything, feel free to contact Miss Wei." With that, Gao Fenghua rose and left. Chapter 8. First Appearance on the Rankings. Chapter 8. First appearance on the rankings after activating his margin trading account. Li Yueqi haggled with Wei Yaij once more over the financing interest rate, eventually settling on a daily rate of 0%, equivalent to an annualized rate of 7%. Normally, the annual interest rate for margin financing is around 6%, and some brokerages might negotiate it down to 5%. However, Zhongxin Securities is a major brokerage, and Li Yueqi didn't meet many of the standard requirements for opening a margin account, so it was difficult to push the interest rate much lower. The offered rate of 7% was already their best gesture of goodwill. That said, given Li Yueqi's profit-making ability, he wasn't too concerned about the slightly higher interest. Both parties quickly reached an agreement as it suited their mutual interests. As for securities lending, the interest would be an additional 2% on top of the 7%, but Li Yueqi had no intention of using that service. After everything was settled, Li Yueqi left Zhongxin Securities' branch office, while Wei Yaij was summoned by Gao Fenghua. Indeed, Gao Fenghua, a seasoned veteran of the financial battlefield, quickly sized up Li Yueqi's true nature with just a few words. He said to Wei Yaij, "Just a rookie, really. Though his trading methods are somewhat baffling, there's no need to pay too much attention." The market is full of such oddballs who strike it lucky. They come and go, now and in the future. Money made by sheer luck can just as easily be lost when that luck runs out. The fact that he rushed to open a margin account the moment he scraped together 500,000 yuan shows impatience. Keep an eye on him, but don't waste too much energy. Wei Yaij nodded in agreement and left. Though Gao Fenghua was a sharp business elite with a keen eye for people, he could never have dreamed that someone in this world could actually see the future movements of the stock market. The world is always home to extraordinary outliers whose sheer luck defies all logic, allowing them to achieve the unimaginable time and again. Today marks the last trading day of September, with the upcoming National Day Golden Week holiday starting tomorrow. Under normal circumstances, Li Yueqi would have been preparing to go home tomorrow to reunite with his parents. However, having lost his job, moved to a new place, yet made a fortune in the stock market, there was simply no way to explain his recent experiences. So he simply called his mother, telling her that the company required overtime work during the holiday, leaving him with only 2 days off, and therefore, he wouldn't be coming home for National Day. Once things settled down, he'd return to properly spend time with his parents. During the National Day holiday, Li Yueqi found himself with nothing to do. Since he didn't have much disposable cash on hand, he could only wander around the city. He had originally planned to call Zhang Yifei to hang out together, but his friend informed him that he'd resigned from his job in Zhongzhou over half a month ago and returned to his hometown to take over the family hotel. Upon hearing this, Li Yueqi could only offer some comforting words, sighing at the unpredictability of life. After graduating college, he alone remained in Zhongzhou among the 4 closest brothers from their university dorm. The passionate years of their youth had scattered like dust in the wind. From now on, it seemed he would have to walk his path alone. The 7-day National Day holiday flew by in the blink of an eye. However, Li Yueqi wasn't entirely idle during this time. By analyzing the stock charts of the coming year, he had basically mapped out his future trading strategies and investment directions. The first dozen trading days in October could be handled casually, but starting from October 27th, a magnificent bull market would begin. The real opportunity to make a fortune was coming. Of course, saying just winging it was for others. For someone like Li Yueqi, who possessed the future charts and could always foresee events, the situation was naturally different. Although the market performance in mid-October was sluggish and even experienced a downer for some time, starting from October 8th, Li Yueqi still went all in with full leverage, trading 3 stocks with an average return rate of 35%. His total capital also surpassed 7.38 million. However, during this period, there was one thing that frustrated Li Yueqi immensely: the algorithm for margin financing. He had assumed that the 5-fold leverage would adjust dynamically based on his current capital. It wasn't until he calculated his profits that he realized the so-called 5-fold leverage was actually based on the initial 500,000 yuan he had when he opened the margin account. In other words, his 5-fold leverage meant the brokerage lent him 5 times his original 500,000 yuan, capping his leveraged funds at 3 million yuan. Any profits earned afterward could not be further leveraged. Still, Li Yueqi was already more than satisfied. Even after deducting the 2.5 million yuan from the margin account, he still had 4.88 million yuan in principal, a fortune beyond most people's wildest dreams at the time. Yet for him, with his foresight into future market trends, the feast of wealth had only just begun. On the 28th, Li Yueqi mobilized 7.38 million yuan to place a full position buy order at the opening price of 8 yuan for Launcher Nuclear Power, a newly listed stock that had already surged over 4-fold. Eventually, all 880,000 shares were filled. Watching his buy orders execute completely, he was exhilarated. This was a legendary speculative stock, and in just a few days, it would deliver him nearly triple the returns. True enough, over the next several days, the stock hit 10 consecutive daily limit up boards. By November 12th, Launcher Nuclear Power's price had soared to 21 yuan, pushing his paper wealth to an astounding 19.07 million yuan. Although even higher prices were expected the following day, he decided to liquidate his position that day. The chart indicated that while the stock would peak higher the next day, November 13th would see no limit up rally, with weak buy-side commitment. Given his substantial holdings, November 12th was the optimal exit window. Missing it could leave him stuck for days. Of course, there are techniques for selling off shares. 880,000 shares equal 8,800 lots. Dumping them all at once could easily spark panic. Once floor traders or major market players catch wind, it could trigger a stampede, making it much harder to offload the shares. That's why he opted for order slicing, selling a few hundred lots every 10 minutes. With 170,000 lots locked in the buy queue, even if the big players noticed, selling a few hundred lots at a time, each with differing amounts, was still tolerable for the time being. Starting from 9:35 a.m., when the stock hit its daily limit up, Li Yueqi began selling small batches, around 300 lots, every 3 to 5 minutes. Though the market makers might have suspected someone was unloading, sheer momentum kept the buy orders firmly stacked with over 100,000 lots. By the time the market neared its midday close, all 880,000 shares of Launcher Nuclear Energy had been successfully sold, cash secured, totaling 19.07 million yuan. Li Yueqi's personal wealth alone had skyrocketed to an astounding 16.57 million. But what he never anticipated was that while 19.07 million might be a modest sum in the grand scheme of the market, for Launcher Nuclear Energy, a notoriously volatile demon stock, it was an eye-popping sell order. The brokerage handling his trades, Zhongxin Securities' Zhengzhou Jingsan Road branch, even made its debut on the day's top 10 buyers and sellers rankings, solely because of his sell-off. The amount, 19.07 million yuan, securing third place among Launcher Nuclear Energy's top sellers that day. Chapter 9, Half a Small Goal Achieved. Chapter 9, Half a Small Goal Achieved on the 12th of the month. After Li Yueqi liquidated his holdings in Launcher Nuclear Power, his fund soared to an astonishing 19.07 million, landing him on the trading leaderboard. Over the following days, there weren't many good opportunities. It wasn't because he couldn't find stocks poised for a surge, but rather because his current capital was no longer suited for the fast-in, fast-out speculative style of hot money. With small-cap stocks, a single purchase could easily drive up the price, while his funds were still too insignificant to move large-cap stocks. Moreover, if the capital scale expands again in the future and trades are made arbitrarily, it could very well alter the trajectory of the chart, leading to many unpredictable changes ahead. If he rushes to buy or sell first, especially with small-cap stocks, he might disrupt the speculative rhythm of hot money traders, causing them to retreat prematurely, effectively sabotaging his own position. Nothing exists in isolation. With tens or hundreds of thousands, you can engage in reckless short-term speculation, but when dealing with massive funds reaching tens or hundreds of millions, advanced planning becomes essential. That kind of frenzied approach simply doesn't apply to capital at the tens of millions level. Thus, portfolio diversification and multi-stock allocation become inevitable choices. Of course, these strategies were only suitable for small-cap stocks or less active stocks with low turnover rates. On November 12th, Li Yueqi allocated 30% of his portfolio to Muyuan shares, and the next day, he added another 20%. After selling his position during a limit up on November 18th, he reinvested half of his capital into Launcher Nuclear Power. Then, on November 19th, Li Yueqi deployed his remaining funds. That day, he used his leftover 9.53 million yuan to purchase 720,000 shares of the large-cap, state-owned insurance giant, Zhongren Life Insurance, at an average price of 13 yuan. This was his first midterm position in anticipation of the upcoming bull market. However, what frustrated him was that even with just half of his capital in launcher heavy equipment, his sell-off during 4 consecutive limit-ups still landed him in the 5th spot on the stock transaction ranking for November 28th, with a sale volume of 16.77 million. But he soon brushed it off. With his profit-making ability, it was inevitable that someone would notice sooner or later. Since he hadn't engaged in any wei gui caozhou irregular operations, there wasn't much they could do even if they investigated. Since Li Yueqi had already allocated half of his portfolio to Zhongren Life Insurance, he didn't want to miss out on the upcoming brokerage sector rally either. After liquidating his Launcher Nuclear Power position, he gradually funneled the newly acquired 16.77 million yuan into Zhongxin Securities. The national stock price of Zhongxin Securities had already been driven up to around 16 yuan at this point. With continuous buying pressure pouring in, Zhongxin Securities' share price kept climbing. After a full day's effort, Li Yueqi finally managed to spend all 16.77 million yuan in cash by the afternoon, establishing an average position at 16 yuan per share and purchasing approximately 1 million shares in total. Li Yueqi now simultaneously holds 720,000 shares of Zhongren Life Insurance and 1 million shares of Zhongxin Securities. Looking at this cost price, Li Yueqi felt rather frustrated. After all, he wasn't a professional trader who could buy low and sell high or suppress prices to establish positions. His approach was simply to keep buying, always chasing rallies and selling into declines. Though he knew the market's future trends, he lacked the professional trader's techniques to arbitrage through sophisticated operations. For now, there was no need to overthink things. With his current limited capital, he was far from being able to establish a financial investment company or hire professional traders. His priority was to ride out this bull market cycle first and see how much profit he could make. Many of his ambitions would have to wait until he had substantially more money before they could even be considered. As Li Yueqi completed his strategic positioning in Zhongren Life Insurance and Zhongxin Securities, the long-awaited bull market finally commenced. His heart was filled with unparalleled excitement, as even the smallest numerical fluctuation now represented more than his entire monthly salary from before. The sensation was surreal. Just 6 months ago, he had been worrying about his next meal and how to afford it. Yet today, he was maneuvering tens of millions of his own capital in the ruthless battlefield of the financial markets. Over the following month, aside from dutifully subscribing to new stock offerings each day, Li Yueqi refrained from any further trading. Although there were multiple opportunities to lower his cost basis, his true skill level simply wasn't suited for such ultra-short-term operations. Moreover, given the sheer size of his capital at this stage, recklessly surrendering his positions would mean sacrificing fleeting opportunities, ultimately leading to more loss than gain. Time arrived at December 31st, the final trading day of 2014. Li Yueqi liquidated his entire holdings, 720,000 shares of Zhongren Life Insurance at an average price of 31 yen and 1 million shares of Zhongxin Securities at an average of 29 yen, generating a total capital return of 51.38 million yen. Thus concluded the heart-pounding first phase of wealth accumulation during the bull market. After deducting the 2.5 million yen margin loan from the brokerage, Li Yueqi's personal gain stood at an auspiciously round 48.88 million yen. From the initial 50,000 yen invested upon opening his account in early July to today's 48.88 million yen, his assets had appreciated roughly 978-fold, close enough to call it a 1,000-fold surge. Half of the small goal famously mentioned by the tycoon, Mr. Wang, had now been achieved, filling Li Yueqi with a quiet but undeniable thrill. Li Yueqi was no miser. His belief was that the purpose of making money was to spend it. Until it was spent, it wasn't truly his own. Though the stock market was in a roaring bull run, he still wanted to use some of his earnings to improve his quality of life. On the very day he sold his stocks, he transferred 5 million yuan out of his account. Instantly, the bank called to inquire about the source of the funds. Putting on a show, Li Yueqi casually dismissed it as profits from stock trading. The line went silent for 3 full seconds, leaving the other end speechless. Li Yueqi assured them they could verify his trading records if they wished, knowing full well they had the means to do so, then hung up amid their stunned silence. But just 30 minutes later, the bank called again, this time with a sweet female voice asking if he was interested in joining their exclusive high-end service tailored for high-net-worth individuals. Li Yueqi's securities account was linked to the third-party custody of ICBC, the Universe Bank, and he had simply bound it to the most ordinary debit card at the time. The caller informed him that given his exceptionally high account balance, they could upgrade him to the Shangri-La Platinum card for enhanced security and superior services. This included perks like airport transfers, VIP lounge access, companion privileges, priority bookings for high-end accommodations, and discounts on shopping, dining, hotels, travel, and vacations. In short, a multitude of premium benefits. Listening to the sweet voice of the ICBC clerk, Li Yueqi felt a slight self-satisfaction. He knew the bank was only interested in the tens of millions in cash he held, but having such a card would undoubtedly make future travel, shopping, and tourism more convenient. So he nodded in agreement. It has to be said that banks really do operate at lightning speed for wealthy clients. Less than an hour after hanging up the phone, the courier delivering his bank card was already standing at the doorstep of his rented guest house. Such as the magnetic pull of money. Li Yueqi's requested transfer of funds wouldn't be available until the next trading day, but ICBC had granted him a credit limit of 500,000 yuan, enough for him to splurge during the New Year's holiday. Chapter 10. Rushing Home. After obtaining ICBC's so-called Shangri-La Platinum card with a 500,000 yuan credit limit, Li Yueqi planned to go out and splurge to experience the life of the wealthy. But after giving it some thought, he immediately felt frustrated because prior to this, Li Yueqi had been a complete nobody. Although he'd suddenly become a millionaire through stock trading, he genuinely had no idea how to spend money properly. Buy a luxury car? He didn't even have a driver's license and couldn't drive at all. Buy a high-end house. He wasn't even sure where he'd be after the new year, though he quite liked living in Zhongzhou. But Zhongzhou wasn't a financial hub, which didn't align well with his career plans. That's why he'd been reluctant to buy property there. He had renewed his rental at the homestay for another 6 months, so he was set until after the holidays. At noon, he treated himself to a lavish seafood feast that cost over 4,000 yuan at checkout. The food was impeccable, especially the Australian lobster, which was incredibly fresh and delicious. Back when 49 yuan barbecue meals were his idea of fine dining, he had no idea how the other half lived until he tasted that lobster. After lunch, he contacted a local driving school and signed up for their Executive Express course, which promised a driver's license in just 20 days. But he intended to actually learn how to drive properly. While he could cut corners to get the license, he knew that if he planned to drive himself, he needed to take lessons seriously. After all, his life was more valuable than money. What good was wealth if you weren't alive to spend it? In the afternoon, Li Yueqi arrived at Zhongxin Securities Jingxin Road branch, where Wei Yaij happened to be present and immediately attended to him. As Li Yueqi's client manager, Wei Yaij had daily access to his trading records. While appalled by the young man's audacity, she couldn't help but admire his trading prowess. After all, she had witnessed firsthand how this penniless college student transformed into a multi-millionaire in an astonishingly short time, and how, against all expectations, he multiplied his assets 1,000-fold within 6 months. Although tales of explosive wealth during bull markets occur daily, consistently reaping extraordinary profits from every trade is a rare phenomenon in this world. What Wei Yaij regretted most was failing to cultivate a relationship with Li Yueqi during his early stages, having instead believed the vice president's dismissal of him as merely another lucky upstart. Though her role as client manager provided some interaction opportunities, her approach had remained indifferent, leaving no meaningful connection between them. Now that he had crossed the Dragon Gate, any excessive enthusiasm would seem deliberate. Maintaining their original nodding acquaintance ironically preserved space for future interactions, leaving room for natural rapport to develop. However, the necessary enthusiasm and service couldn't be lacking. Wei Yaij led Li Yueqi to the premium VIP room and inquired warmly, "Mr. Li, may I ask what business brings you to our company today?" Li Yueqi said, "I want to reapply for the financing leverage limit. How much can you offer me this time?" Wei Yaij frowned and said, "I'm sorry, Mr. Li. Since the latter half of last year, the market has been recovering and stock margin trading has been extremely popular. However, the regulatory authorities have issued notices requiring tighter control over margin trading services, and the Supervision Bureau will restart inspections of margin financing services. Both banks and the Insurance Regulatory Commission have been restricted from engaging in margin trading business. In short, there are strict limitations on leveraged funds entering the market." Wei Yaij took out Li Yueqi's previous contract and said, "The five-fold leverage previously granted to you must be reduced to within 2 times. Given your current substantial capital amount, we may even have to consider lowering it to 1 time. I was planning to discuss this matter with you. Now that you're here, let's settle it properly." Li Yueqi said with some frustration, "I originally came here to increase my leverage, but you guys ended up reducing it instead. The market is booming right now. What a great opportunity to make money. If I miss it, I might not get such a good chance again in the future. Wei Yaij also said helplessly, "This is the decision from the management level above. I'm just a small client manager. I don't have the authority to make calls here." Li Yueqi smiled and said, "All right then, see how much quota you can give me?" Wei Yaij took out the funding documents and said, "The maximum we can offer is 2 times leverage. It seems you withdrew another 5 million today. After deducting the 250 financing you repaid, you now have 43.8 million left in your account. So in total, we can provide you with 87.6 million in financing." Li Yueqi thought for a moment and said, "Okay, then please help me process it as soon as possible. I have other matters to attend to in the afternoon. Thank you." Li Yueqi was also well aware that his 43.8 million capital was simply too high. No legitimate institution would dare grant him 5 times leverage on such an amount. If something went wrong, no one could shoulder the responsibility. Of course, he could still turn to off-exchange leverage platforms, but these had their own pitfalls. On one hand, such platforms were notoriously unstable, with the ever-present risk of them suddenly vanishing with the funds. On the other hand, private leverage platforms typically operated at smaller scales, making it impossible for them to accommodate his need for hundreds of millions in leverage financing. A dozen minutes later, Li Yueqi repaid the principal and interest from his previous margin loan to the securities firm and reapplied for margin financing, this time reducing the leverage to 2x. By the next market open, he would have 100 million yuan in trading capital at his disposal. After finishing all the formalities, Li Yueqi left the business hall and decided to wander around the city. First, he browsed the electronics market intending to buy a higher performance computer. After looking around for a while, he settled on a premium Asus Ultrabook, equipped with the latest processor, a powerful graphics card, 1000 high-speed network card, and everything one could ask for, costing him over 15,000 yuan. He then headed back to the service center to apply for an Ice Cream Unlimited data plan, which came with a free 500 megabits per second fiber optic connection. It was his way of upgrading his setup with better gear. One evening, with nothing pressing to do, Li Yueqi called home to check in with his parents. He noticed a simmering anger in his father Li Jianmin's voice, while his mother Zhou Xiaoping's tone carried traces of restrained sobs. Unable to comprehend what had happened, Yueqi grew deeply anxious and pressed for details. Both parents dodged his questions with vague responses, fueling his agitation further. That same night, he hired a taxi driver, offering 1,000 yuan as premium fare, to rush him home overnight. Nothing mattered more to Yueqi than his parents' well-being. By 11 p.m., the taxi pulled into the aging residential compound where his family lived. The car stopped at the foot of the Li's apartment building. This was an employee housing complex built by a state-owned enterprise in the 1990s. Its architecture worn and outdated by modern standards. The Li family's circumstances were far from destitute. Both Li Jianmin and Zhou Xiaoping worked at the same state-owned factory, and during the company's profitable years, there had been an enviable household among relatives, often extending financial help to kin in need. However, as profits declined in the state-owned enterprise where his parents, Li Jianmin and Zhou Xiaoping, worked over the years, delays in salary payments became frequent, and supporting relatives was entirely out of the question. Thus, the drama of a kindness rewarded with enmity unfolded once more. Relatives who used to visit often began finding excuses to drop by less frequently. Both Li Jianmin and Zhou Xiaoping were proud people who hoped their son would rise above the crowd and bring them honor. Back when Li Yueqi ranked second in the public service exam, though his father didn't say much, it was clear he was in good spirits. Later events made Li Yueqi swear to prove himself and make his parents proud. So when he sensed something weighing on his parents' hearts, he rushed home overnight without hesitation. Chapter 11, Heart to Heart with Parents, Part 1. It was already past 10 p.m. when Li Yueqi arrived home, but he knew his parents Li Jianmin and Zhou Xiaoping had the habit of staying up late. They probably hadn't gone to bed yet. As soon as Li Yueqi opened the door, he saw his father smoking while watching TV. Li Jianmin was equally surprised by his son's sudden return. "What brings you home so late at night?" Li Jianmin quickly put out his cigarette and asked. "Felt like something was up at home, so I took a taxi back. Li Yueqi glanced around the room and asked, "Where's Mom?" "In a room, playing on the computer." Just as they were speaking, Mom came out from the inner room. "Why are you back in the middle of the night? There are no long-distance buses at this hour. Did you take the train?" "No choice. Coming back at this time would surely surprise his parents." Li Yueqi explained, "Nothing much going on during New Year's. Just came back to visit. Didn't take the train. It's too slow. Hired a taxi instead." Zhou Xiaoping complained. "Taxi rides cost a fortune, don't they? Must have spent quite a bit. You just started making some money. You should save it." Listening to his mother's grumbling, Li Yueqi felt a pang in his heart. His father wouldn't turn 50 until next year, and his mother was only 46, still in their prime. Yet the pressures of life had aged them far beyond their years. They bustled about all day for meager wages. Also, the family could live a decent life. And here he was, utterly disappointing, constantly failing to live up to their expectations. This time, Li Yueqi was determined to properly honor his parents and let them experience their son's filial devotion. "You haven't eaten yet, coming back so late? I'll go prepare some food for you." As she spoke, Zhou Xiaoping was about to head to the kitchen to make something for her son. It seems every mother is the same, first concerned about their child's basic needs: food, clothing, and shelter. "I've already had dinner. I was eating when I called you 2 hours ago." "Mom, don't bother. There's something I want to ask you," Li Yueqi said while holding his mother back, then continued questioning. "I could tell something was wrong from your voices on the phone. It sounded like Mom was crying, and Dad's tone wasn't right either. What's going on? What happened?" Li Jianmin glared at Zhou Xiaoping and said, "Just coming back to see us is enough. If you're free tomorrow, head back early. Don't worry so much about family matters. Just focus on doing your job well. How's work been lately?" All parents never want their son to be burdened by family, so they always share only the good news, never the troubles. But they don't realize their son is already capable of sheltering the family from storms. Li Yueqi said, "It's fine, no rush. I've already quit that job, and I don't plan to return after New Year's." He still hadn't dared to confess the deception of these past months to his parents, only glossing over the fact that he had resigned. Zhou Xiaoping asked in surprise, "Why quit when things were going so well? Didn't you always say the job was great and the boss admired you? What will you do now after resigning? Jobs are so hard to come by these days." Li Yueqi said, "The purpose of working is actually to earn money. I made quite a bit this year from stock trading, so I won't be going to work anymore. After the new year, I plan to start my own company." Stock trading. Li Jianmin and Zhou Xiaoping were no strangers to the stock market. As seasoned investors with 7 or 8 years of experience, they had invested a large portion of their savings during the 2007 stock market boom, when prices soared daily, allowing the Li family to enjoy several months of prosperity. However, that nationwide frenzy didn't last long. The 2008 crash left devastation in its wake, wiping out decades of Li Jianmin and Zhou Xiaoping's hard-earned savings. From then on, stock trading became a taboo subject in the Li household. Although Li Jianmin and Zhou Xiaoping had grown wary of stock trading, they hadn't completely lost interest in the market. Aware of the recent surge, their investor instincts told them another bull run might be coming. But their previous losses still haunted them, once bitten, twice shy, and they had no intention of diving back in. Now, they also wanted to caution their son against becoming too absorbed in stock speculation. Li Jianmin continued, "With your small capital, how much can you really make from stock trading? And that income isn't stable either. Just look around. How many people in society treat stock trading as a full-time profession?" Zhou Xiaoping also advised, "That's right. You think you're making money now because the market's good, but how long can this last? When it comes to stocks, it's always 7 lose, 2 break even, and only 1 profits. Everyone makes money when the market's rising, but when it turns bad, you hear about many jumping off buildings." Li Yueqi knew his parents were speaking out of concern. Rather than argue, he decided to tell them the truth. "Mom, Dad, guess how much I've actually made from the stock market?" "Tell us, how much?" Li Jianmin and Zhou Xiaoping asked simultaneously. Li Yueqi chuckled slyly and uttered that astonishing figure, 48 million. "How much?" Li Jianmin and Zhou Xiaoping thought they must have misheard, so they asked again loudly. 48 million, Li Yueqi replied with certainty. Zhou Xiaoping quickly asked, "How did you trade? How much was your principal? You haven't done anything illegal, have you?" "Don't worry, Mom. I just came back from the securities company this afternoon. Everything is fully compliant and legal. I even withdrew $5 million to buy you and Dad a new house and a car to improve your living conditions, Li Yueqi reassured his mother. To back up his claims, Li Yueqi handed his mother the ICBC Shangri-La Platinum card that the bank had given him. Mom, this is for you. The Platinum card just arrived this morning. It has a 500,000 yuan credit limit, and the PIN is my lunar calendar birthday. It comes with loads of shopping and travel perks. If you ever face any issues, just contact them. They can help resolve a lot of problems. I'll have them update the authorized users to you and Dad soon. If that's not possible, I'll just request 2 more cards for each of you. This is just temporary. Once I transfer out some more money, I'll have them issue you and Dad each an Amex Centurion Black card, Li Yueqi boasted while trying to calm his mother down. Zhou Xiaoping took the bank card handed to her by her son in a daze, glanced blankly at her husband, her mind completely blank, unsure of what to say. Fortunately, Li Jianmin had stronger mental resilience and continued to inquire. Can you show me your transaction records? Li Yueqi hurriedly took out his phone, opened the trading app, where the account information was clearly displayed. Account holder, Li Yueqi. Account balance, 4,888 yuan. Available balance, 4,388 yuan. Third-party custodian, Industrial and Commercial Bank of China. Transfer amount, 500 yuan. Actions speak louder than words. The figures in the account needed no further explanation from Li Yueqi. Only then did Li Jianmin and Zhou Xiaoping truly believe that their son had indeed struck it rich. Chapter 12, Heart to Heart with Parents, Part 2. Chapter 12, Heart to Heart with Parents, Part 2. Li Jianmin and Zhou Xiaoping were stunned for quite some time by the figures on their son's account. But the funds in Li Yueqi's account were unmistakable proof of the truth. Meanwhile, Yueqi showed his parents the transaction records, confirming that he had only deposited 50,000 yuan at the beginning of July. Li Jianmin and his wife were aware of this 50,000 yuan. More than half comprised Li Yueqi's years of saved-up New Year money and pocket cash, while the other portion consisted of private savings and settling in funds that Zhou Xiaoping had transferred to their son before he left for Zhongzhou to work. Initially intended to ease his financial pressure during employment, they never anticipated the boy would invest the entire sum in the stock market. Yet within 6 months, it had multiplied nearly 1,000-fold. Zhou Xiaoping finally let out a long sigh of relief, gently patting her son as the resentment bottled up in her heart for days finally eased. Li Jianmin also lit a cigarette, took a deep drag, and slowly revealed the reason behind the recent conflict with his wife. It turned out that Zhou Xiaoping had received a call from her cousin, Li Yueqi's aunt, in Luqing. The cousin claimed to have partnered in running a traditional Chinese medicine company there, specializing in local herb acquisition, and urgently needed a loan of 100,000 yuan for working capital, promising repayment within a few months. Zhou, being warm-hearted and historically close with this relative, transferred the family's entire liquid savings, over 100,000 yuan, without consulting her husband, only advising prompt return if unused. After sending the money, however, the cousin suddenly became unreachable, ignoring calls and messages for months. Sensing trouble, Zhou finally confessed this to her husband Li Jianmin. While he didn't blame his wife for helping family, they jointly tried contacting the cousin through other relatives. Their efforts eventually led to her younger brother, Zhou's uncle. The uncle revealed that his sister wasn't in the herb trade at all. She joined a pyramid scheme that had swindled their entire extended family. No one expected she'd even target her distant cousin. Though searching for her, the family currently had no leads, but promised to notify Zhou immediately if found. This news struck Li Jianmin and Zhou Xiaoping like a thunderbolt. That money was their last emergency fund, with little left in fixed deposits and their stocks trapped in losses. Now, any unexpected crisis would leave the Li family financially helpless. Although Li Jianmin didn't openly blame his wife for this matter, his underlying resentment was understandable, and it manifested more or less in their daily life. Meanwhile, Zhou Xiaoping not only had to bear the heartache of losing over 100,000 yuan to a scam, but also endure her husband's unspoken displeasure. So her psychological burden was immense. That's why when she answered their son's call today, her tearful voice worried Li Yueqi for quite a while. After hearing about his mother being scammed, Li Yueqi knew all he could do was comfort her as much as possible. Besides, the money he had earned was more than enough to cover the family's loss and soothe his parents' feelings. So he responded generously. Dad, Mom, don't worry. It's just a little over 100,000 yuan, right? Tomorrow, the 5 million will arrive in my account, and I'll transfer all of it to you. Buy whatever you want. How does that sound? Our house has been around for almost 20 years, and living on the 5th floor without an elevator is hardly convenient. There are some great new developments nearby. Nice environment, elevators, and close to downtown. Tomorrow, let's buy 2 apartments, both under Mom's name. And Dad, you've had a driver's license for so many years, yet we've never owned a car. Tomorrow, we'll get you a good one. What do you think? Listening to their son's unreliable boasting, Li Jianmin and Zhou Xiaoping exchanged glances. Zhou Xiaoping said, "What do you need so many houses for? As long as we have a place to live, that's enough. We should save this money for your future marriage." Li Yueqi exaggeratedly replied, "Mom, 500 grand is barely enough for a wedding. This money is just for you and Dad to spend as pocket change. My account still has tens of millions. You've seen my trading records. With my skills and earning speed, making billions in a year is a piece of cake. There'll be more money than we could ever spend. That's just because you got lucky with this bull market. I saw you even use leverage, 5 times at that. If anything shakes the market, that money could vanish in an instant. You can't fool me with your little tricks." Zhou Xiaoping scolded her son, clearly displeased. "Once or twice might be luck, but I've made dozens of trades in half a year. Have you seen me lose once? Here, I'll pick a few stocks at random. See if they hit the upper limit next week." Mom, Dad, witness your son's skills firsthand, and then you'll believe me. Li Yueqi continued his wild boasting. "These 5 million are for you and Dad to spend however you like. At the very least, buy our family a bigger apartment with an elevator first, then get Dad a car." After discussing it, Li Jianmin and Zhou Xiaoping acknowledged their son's filial intentions, but felt that buying a house and a car were major decisions not to be made lightly on a whim. Still, they figured there was no harm in checking out nearby real estate developments and local 4S dealerships during the New Year holiday when they were off work. As the Li family talked, time slipped past midnight. The year 2014 had ended, and hopeful 2015 had finally arrived. Li Yueqi continued chatting with his parents, sharing stories and experiences from the past 6 months, losing track of how late it had gotten. Suddenly, his phone buzzed with a notification. The 5 million yuan transferred from his brokerage account had just arrived in his bank account. Excited, he shared the news with his parents and showed them the confirmation message. Only when Li Jianmin and Zhou Xiaoping were completely reassured did they continue chatting with their son until all 3 began yawning and retired to their respective rooms for the night. Chapter 13. Dad Buys a Car. Chapter 13. Dad Buys a Car. The next day was New Year's Day, and all the 4S dealerships were bustling. Over the years, as life had improved and more people had money, the number of car buyers had naturally increased. Li Jianmin was personally very excited. After all, he had obtained his driver's license over a decade ago, and, usually, the most he could do was drive the company's car occasionally to satisfy his urge. When visiting relatives during holidays, Li Jianmin had no choice but to borrow a friend's car, which always made him feel somewhat ashamed. Yet, with the couple's modest income, the cost of owning a car was too high, and they still had to support their son's university education. So they had never mustered the resolve to buy a car of their own. Now that his son had suddenly come into wealth and told him to pick any car model he wanted, Li Jianmin had spent a long time scrolling through his phone before bed last night, carefully researching several models he had long admired, including several luxurious sports cars. However, his wife stepped in to stop him, capping the car budget at around 300,000 yuan. Although their son's money had already been transferred, it had gone into his wife's account, and she had only taken 3 million, leaving the rest for their son. After all, he still needed to live in Zhongzhou. 2 million was still a substantial amount, enough to buy many high-end luxury cars. But after hearing their son's persuasion, his wife actually planned to buy a new apartment near the factory district. Her reasoning was simple. The more they spent on a car, the less they'd have for a house. If not for their son's insistence, she would have used all 3 million to buy property. Well, 300,000 it is, then. Li Jianmin thought gloomily, figuring he'd wait until their son made even more money and could spare some private funds for his old man. Then they could talk about other luxury cars. Li Yueqi didn't have a driver's license, so he wasn't particularly invested in car models. But Li Jianmin, a veteran driver with over a decade of experience, knew every model inside and out. With Zhou Xiaoping's predetermined budget of around 300,000 yuan, the family of three woke up early and headed to Pingshan City's automotive district. The three of them arrived at their destination in high spirits. Since it was New Year's Day, every car dealership was running aggressive promotions with countless gimmicks. There were also glamorous car models dressed in revealing outfits, paired with various classic luxury cars, a dazzling spectacle of beautiful cars and even more beautiful women. Li Yueqi, who had never seen anything like it, stared wide-eyed. However, with his wife by his side, Li Jianmin could only admire the luxury cars and steal the briefest glances at the models. Zhou Xiaoping naturally understood men's fascination with pretty women, but the father and son reacted quite differently. While she let their son look freely, she kept a close eye on her husband. If his gaze lingered too long, she'd glare at him sharply. Feeling slightly frustrated, Li Jianmin could only mutter, "Such cold weather, and these girls are dressed so lightly. Don't they feel the chill?" Zhou Xiaoping frowned even more at her husband's comment and pinched the soft flesh under his ribs. The pinch from his wife quickly sobered Li Jianmin up, and he focused his attention back on the luxury cars. As for the minor domestic violence between his parents, Li Yueqi could only turn a blind eye, pretending not to notice, and concentrated on admiring the beautiful women in the cars. After walking around the market several times, the family had browsed the flagship stores of all the major car brands and compared several nearby models. As Li Jianmin explained, there weren't actually many options available. Beyond price, buying a car was mostly about the feeling, not just the driving experience, but also the sense of space inside the car. The length of the seats, the height of the steering wheel, whether the accessories met their preferences, and so on. After multiple rounds of comparisons, Li Jianmin finally settled on the Audi. It had a moderate design, elegant color options, four-wheel drive, a 2.0L engine with turbocharging, an 8-speed automatic transmission, dual front airbags, a sunroof, parking sensors, and leather seats. Pretty much everything suited his taste. The only issue was that the price slightly exceeded their budget, coming in at around 430,000 yuan. Zhou Xiaoping wasn't too happy about it. In the end, Li Yueqi waved his hand and declared that the money wouldn't come from the 3 million yuan he'd given his parents. He'd cover the entire cost himself. That money could be used to buy a better house for his parents, and the car would just be a small token of his filial piety toward his father. Though Zhou Xiaoping still grumbled a bit, she didn't say anything further in the face of her son's generosity. Inside the show car at the dealership, Li Jianmin sat in the driver's seat, running his hands over the steering wheel and dashboard while murmuring words of admiration. Li Yueqi asked the sales consultant for a test drive. Recognizing serious customers, the consultant immediately made a call to arrange it. In less than 10 minutes, the family of three was led by the staff to the test drive area, where a vehicle was handed over to Li Jianmin. Without hesitation, Li Jianmin got into the car, adjusted the seat position, fastened his seatbelt, and immediately shifted gears to start the engine. True to being a seasoned driver with over a decade of experience, Li Jianmin handled every maneuver effortlessly, whether it was turning, climbing slopes, driving through sandy terrain, or braking. The Audi performed exceptionally well, running smoothly with just the right suspension resilience, proving itself as a time-tested classic model. Li Jianmin enthusiastically shared his driving experience with his wife and son, but unfortunately, neither of them could drive and were utterly baffled by his insights, feeling completely lost. Frustrated, Li Jianmin urged his son to hurry up and get a driver's license. After all, a man should ultimately drive his own car. However, Li Yueqi could tell his father was quite satisfied with this model, so he went straight back to the dealership to handle the paperwork and make payment. Returning to the showroom, the sales consultant introduced Audi's various models: dynamic, elegant, progressive, fashion, and premium, each with distinct features and services, ranging in price from 380,000 yen to 540,000 yen. The consultant then vigorously touted the benefits of the top-tier premium model. Li Yueqi was still completely bewildered, unable to comprehend why one car model could have so many variants with such huge price differences. Left with no choice, he turned to his father for help, asking him to make the decision. Li Jiamin arrived immediately. Naturally, he was inclined to choose the luxury model, but under his wife's domineering pressure, he had to settle for a premium fashion variant priced around 450,000 yuan, opting for the composed ibis white color scheme. As for the miscellaneous accessories, decorations, license plate registration, and after-sale services, Li Jiamin went straight to negotiate with the dealer. This was where his true expertise as a seasoned car buyer shone, having accompanied friends on multiple car purchases before and being thoroughly familiar with the entire process. Popular car models were never in stock. It would take about a week after placing the order before the car could be picked up. After carefully reviewing the purchase contract one more time, Li Jiamin had Li Yueqi handle the paperwork. Only a deposit was technically required, but Li Yueqi found it bothersome and simply pulled out his Shangri-La Platinum card. He had originally intended to give it to his mother the day before, but Zhou Xiaoping declined, returning it to him since mismatched cardholder names would cause hassle when handling transactions. Li Yueqi saw the logic in this and figured he'd just apply for 2 platinum cards under his parents' own names later. Under the enthusiastic guidance of the salesperson, Li Yueqi directly paid the full amount of 450,000 yuan, thus concluding the car purchase process for the Li family. Now, they only needed to wait for the dealership's notification to pick up the vehicle. The family of 3 left the auto mall with the father extremely satisfied. Chapter 14. Parents Buy a House. After finalizing the plans for buying both a house and a car by Chapter 14, it was nearly noon. The family of 3 enjoyed a delicious Sichuan meal before strolling through the city center. Seeing her son and husband spending lavishly, Zhou Xiaoping also indulged herself, splurging over 3,000 yuan on a luxurious mink fur coat that felt incredibly soft to the touch. As the saying goes, clothes make the man, or in this case, the woman. The moment Zhou Xiaoping put it on, she instantly shone brighter, looking at least 5 years younger. In addition, the family of 3 went in and out of various major shopping malls and pedestrian streets in the city, each buying quite a few nice pieces of clothing. They lugged large and small bags back home. After entering the neighborhood, they ran into many familiar neighbors and co-workers, who all curiously asked, "Why did you buy so many things?" Zhou Xiaoping said with a hint of pride, "Our son made some money working outside and insisted on buying all these things for us. He even got his dad a car worth over 400,000 yuan. Young people just don't know how to save. The moment they earn a little money, they blow it all. We couldn't stop him." As she spoke, she shot her son a glance filled with pride. Watching the envious looks from the neighbors, Li Yueqi didn't interrupt his mom's boasting. He knew this feeling was exactly what his parents wanted, and one of the key reasons he'd worked so hard to earn money. Early the next morning, Mom Zhou Xiaoping dragged the father-son duo to look at property developments. For many families, buying a house is an enormously important life event. The Li family had been strapped for cash before, so the 3 of them had lived in their decades-old home all this time. Now that their son finally had money, why wait any longer to buy a better place? Since 2013, Pingshan's real estate market had been skyrocketing. Property selling for just over 4,000 yuan in this small city just a year ago had already surged by 50%. If they didn't buy now, who knew how much higher prices would climb? In truth, Li Yueqi knew the real estate market was in its final manic phase. Though many new developments were opening in the city and prices were soaring, transaction volumes were sluggish. Most of the time, prices were high, but no one was buying. Don't be fooled by those real estate agents with their grand promises. If properties were truly selling well, would they really need to bombard people with daily sales calls? The vacancy rate in this small city is alarmingly high, with most buyers treating purchases purely as investments. Take those newly completed developments, originally sold as pre-sale properties. Now that they've been built, at least half remain unsold. The sales figures are even more dismal. Li Yueqi pleaded with his parents to buy a new house because their current living conditions were truly less than ideal. His dad and mom were approaching 50, and since their old apartment didn't have an elevator, climbing up and down 5 flights of stairs every day was becoming exhausting. Moreover, The building, constructed in the 1990s, was nearly 2 decades old, plagued by issues like cracks, leaks, and dampness, problems they had endured when money was tight. But now that he had the means, there was no reason to let his family continue suffering. After visiting several properties, Zhou Xiaoping and Li Jianmin weren't very satisfied. Though Li Yueqi personally thought the apartments looked quite good, his parents kept finding faults everywhere: poor natural lighting, insufficient green spaces, windowless bathrooms, bad ventilation, too few bedrooms. Every place seemed riddled with shortcomings in their eyes. In fact, Li Jianmin and Zhou Xiaoping knew they didn't have too many options for properties to choose from. Besides evaluating the properties themselves, they also had to consider the surrounding environment, the number of supermarkets and wet markets, the distance to their workplaces, the availability of nearby hospitals, and even whether there were good schools in the vicinity. After a whole day of shopping around, they still couldn't decide which property to buy, and the couple kept arguing. Li Yueqi simply played the role of a quiet bystander and walking wallet. Offering any opinion on such matters would only earn him trouble without thanks. Exhausted by evening, he could only reward himself by eating a little more. On the 3rd of the month, they spent another long half-day browsing and finally settled on the Linxi Valley residential community, about a kilometer from their workplace. Li Yueqi tagged along and had to admit his parents had a keen eye. The location was excellent, about a kilometer from their workplaces, making it convenient whether by car or on foot. There were several clinics and 2 community hospitals nearby. The complex itself housed several supermarkets, and the fresh market wasn't too far away, though the price was a bit steep at around 5,200 yuan per square meter. After some debate between the couple, they ultimately chose a 2-story duplex on the 22nd floor. The unit boasted 3 living rooms and 8 main bedrooms, along with a panoramic balcony, totaling 358 square meters. The preliminary estimate came to about 1.86 million yuan. Once decided, they immediately discussed a viewing with the sales agent. The saleswoman, seeing that the family had made up their minds so quickly, recognized them as serious buyers. After verifying their financial credentials, she promptly took all 3 to inspect the property. During the house viewing, Li Yueqi thought the apartment was quite nice, but Zhou Xiaoping still managed to point out various flaws. The sales agent noted them down one by one, explaining that as long as they paid a 1/3 deposit, the renovations could be done according to her requirements. The family of 3 spent nearly half an hour examining the property, taking photos and making comparisons. In the end, Zhou Xiaoping made the final decision. This was the one they wanted. The sales agent was thrilled, addressing them affably as uncle and auntie. After all, although such buyers might seem picky, few could make a decisive purchase and pay the deposits so swiftly. Then came another round of bargaining, with the buyer insisting they could pay the full amount up front. The sales agent promptly consulted her supervisor, and the sales director of the property department personally received the Li family, offering a 3% discount along with a complimentary parking space. In this small town, incomes weren't high, and full cash buyers were rare. A client who could fork out nearly 2 million in one go was definitely a prize catch. Li Jianmin discussed with the sales director whether they could purchase an additional parking space. Since both he and his wife drove, one space might not suffice. He knew his son Li Yueqi, though he couldn't drive yet, had already enrolled in the advanced training program at Zhongzhou Driving School and would likely get his license before the new year. Buying a car afterward would only be logical. Having just one parking space simply wouldn't be enough. The sales director hesitated. After all, parking spaces were scarcer than ready-to-move-in apartments, and the policy stipulated only 1 space per unit. Li Jianmin argued that their 358 square meter duplex was equivalent to 2 or even 3 regular apartments. Why couldn't they have 2 spaces? Besides, the first space came free with the purchase, and they'd be paying for the second one outright. It wasn't taking advantage of the developer, nor was it putting them at a loss. The sales director consulted with superiors and quickly received approval. The final price was set at 1.8 million yuan, plus an additional 30,000 yuan for parking spaces. They purchased this 358 square meter duplex apartment and 2 parking spaces, with only the couple Li Jianmin and Zhou Xiaoping's names registered as buyers. After paying 1/3 of the deposit, The construction team, arranged by the property developer, began renovating the apartment according to Zhou Xiaoping's requirements. However, the renovations would take about a week, and the full payment would only be made after completion. Only upon full payment could they proceed with hiring designers for interior decoration. Chapter 15. The Son's Suggestion. Chapter 15. The Son's Suggestion. After settling the housing matter, Li Yueqi was initially prepared to return to Zhongzhou, but Zhou Xiaoping reminded him that going back now would mean being alone again. He could trade stocks anywhere, and it wasn't easy coming home, so he might as well stay a couple more days. Li Yueqi realized this was his mother missing her son, so he wasn't in a hurry to return. Since there were no trading days in the first week of 2015, he simply stayed home a few extra days to accompany his parents. Li Jianmin and Zhou Xiaoping had originally planned to go to work, but with their son being their top priority, they took several days off. Together, they toured all the scenic spots around Pingshan City. Pingshan City was just a small town with few tourist attractions. The newly built wetland park looked nice, but it was already winter, and the wetland park was freezing cold with little scenery to enjoy. So the family of three simply rented a car, and Li Jianmin took his wife and son to nearby hot springs for a couple of days. Previously, they either didn't have the time or couldn't afford it, but now, with money and time to spare, the trio enjoyed themselves thoroughly. During this time, Li Yueqi suggested his parents quit their jobs. Li Jianmin worked as a lathe technician in the factory, laboring on the front lines year-round, which was extremely taxing. Zhou Xiaoping was an administrator in the factory's archives room. Though she didn't do physically demanding work, managing and organizing the factory's records was no easy task, and her overtime during holidays was sometimes even more excessive than Li Jianmin's. Li Yueqi proposed to his parents, "Dad, Mom, why don't you just retire or take early retirement? After all, working for 20 years qualifies you for it. Both of you have long since met that requirement. Now that we've already bought the car, road trips are super popular these days. There's Qinghai, Tibet, Xinjiang, even the river towns of Jiangnan. Plenty of cultural heritage and stunning scenery. Right now, our family isn't short on money. You can drive wherever you want and stay as long as you like. Book the most luxurious hotels everywhere you go and sample the finest local delicacies. If it's inconvenient, I'll buy you both the best RV. If you can't find a hotel, you can simply stay in your own vehicle. Dad, you and Mom should enjoy life while you're still young. In a few more years, when you're older, even if you want to enjoy it, you won't have the energy to travel anymore." "Mom," Zhou Xiaoping said bluntly, "your father and I aren't even 50 yet. We can't just retire that easily. Besides, once we retire and have nothing to do, we'll probably fall ill. Even though you've earned some money, it's just because you got lucky during the bull market. Anyone can make money in a bull market. Don't mistake a bull market for skill. If you stop making money and your father and I retire, what will our family live on?" Li Jianmin also said, "That's right, Yueqi. You do have a talent for making money, and 40 million may seem like a lot at first glance. But if you really stop working to enjoy it, it's actually not as much as you think. Just take our recent spending, for instance, buying houses, cars, and all those clothes has already cost over 2 million. You aren't married yet, and you don't even own a place of your own. I know you have big ambitions. You probably look down on life in this small town and always want to make a name for yourself in the big city. But if you go there, that money of yours might not even be enough to buy a decent apartment. You're not married yet, and you don't even have a girlfriend right now. Dating, marriage, raising kids, every step will cost you a fortune later. The little money you have now won't be enough to cover all that." Zhou Xiaoping, hearing her husband mention their son's marriage, also grew enthusiastic. "Exactly, you should find a girlfriend as soon as possible. Whenever we brought it up before, you either said you had no time or brushed it off, saying the conditions weren't right. But now we have both time and resources. I'll go back and ask around to arrange a match for you. Once you have a girlfriend, maybe your mind won't wander so wildly." As Li Yueqi listened, he sensed the conversation taking an unexpected turn, from persuading his parents to retire to being pressured into marriage by them. Immediately, he dodged the topic and skillfully steered the discussion elsewhere, figuring he'd revisit the matter of convincing them another time when the opportunity arose. After a few more days of fun together, the family welcomed the start of a new week. On the first Monday of the year, Li Jianmin and Zhou Xiaoping both went to work, while Li Yueqi stayed home to execute his investment plan. The stock market opened strongly right from the start in 2015, surging upward. By mid-morning, he had converted his entire principal of 43.8 million yuan and leveraged funds of 87.6 million into stocks, purchasing shares in 7 different companies, all bought near their lowest prices for the day. By the time the market closed for the midday break, 5 of the 7 stocks had hit their daily limit up, while the other 2 had gained over 7%. In just one morning, Li Yueqi had accrued floating profits of 12 million yuan. After work, Li Jianmin and Zhou Xiaoping immediately went to their son's room and were speechless when they saw his morning profits. The couple had worked their entire lives, yet hadn't earned as much as their son did in just one morning. In the afternoon's opening session, the remaining 2 stocks he held also soared to their daily limit. Within a single day, all 7 stocks Li Yueqi selected had hit their limit ups. Faced with their son's seemingly effortless money-making ability, Li Jianmin and Zhou Xiaoping, being veteran stock traders, fully understood its implications. Previously, they had grumbled about his recent extravagant spending, but witnessing such earning power made those expenses seem trivial. Still, they decided to observe for a few more days. The next day, 2 of Li Yueqi's 7 stocks opened at their daily limit, while the others rose by at least 3%. Only one opened lower, but quickly rebounded. He then began rotating his positions, selling 5 stocks and replacing them with 4 new picks from his previous day selection. After 2 days of trading, his overall unrealized gains exceeded 20%. Returning home from work, Li Jianmin and Zhou Xiaoping were once again rendered speechless. But now, they harbored no doubts about their son's terrifying profitability. Even in a raging bull market, individuals capable of consistently picking multiple limit-up stocks daily were exceptionally rare. Certainly, the couple had never encountered any. Now that their own son had become such a prodigy, they felt both profoundly astonished and infinitely proud. That evening, Li Yueqi shared his plan with his parents. "Dad, Mom, I have an idea to discuss with you. Both of you have your own stock accounts. How about letting me handle them? I'll deposit 10 million into each of your accounts as trading capital. From now on, the principal and any profits earned will serve as your retirement fund. This way, we can avoid trading risks. And since my own trading volume has become too large, even a routine transaction could land me on the buy-sell capital rankings, easily exposing me. Using your accounts would also help reduce the risk of exposure. You can withdraw this money anytime for daily expenses. Consider it a small token of your son's filial devotion. What do you think?" Chapter 16. Managing Parents' Investments. Chapter 16. Managing Parents' Investments. After Li Yueqi spent considerable time explaining, his parents finally understood their son's intentions. In their eyes, all that talk about avoiding trading risks and preventing exposure was just an excuse. With over 100 million in capital, a mere 10 or 20 million less wouldn't make any real difference. His ultimate purpose was crystal clear. He was worried they'd refuse if he gave them money directly, so he concocted this roundabout method to increase their pocket money. Faced with their son's filial devotion, Li Jianming and Zhou Xiaoping thought it over briefly and agreed to his suggestion. Of course, their consideration wasn't about pocket money, but planning for their son's future. Li Jianmin and Zhou Xiaoping felt their son's trading methods carried too much risk. They could gradually withdraw portions of his earnings as a safeguard for him. With the stock market in a major bull run, any strategy would yield profits, so they let Li Yueqi handle the stock selections. From their observations over these 2 days, his stock-picking ability was quite impressive. Doubling or tripling their investment in this bull market wouldn't be difficult. But once they believed the bull market had ended, they planned to transfer the money out of their account and securely deposit it. Even if Li Yueqi's investments failed in the future, they could still provide him with capital for a comeback. Or, better yet, they could stay away from the stock market altogether. A few million would be more than enough to live comfortably in the small city of Pingshan for the rest of their lives. Seeing his parents agree to his proposal, Li Yueqi sold 2 underperforming stocks on Wednesday, January 7th, raising 20 million yuan, which he immediately applied to withdraw. However, after the bullish opening following the New Year's Day holiday, the overall market has begun to consolidate again, making stock selection relatively more difficult. Among the previously purchased stocks, except for the two sold to raise funds. The others have performed reasonably well. Still, the stocks he selected based on line charts showed strong staying power. Although they softened over the past couple of days, they were poised for decent gains in the coming days. In the final minutes of the morning session, Li Yueqi adjusted his portfolio again, selling two stocks that had risen significantly and repurchasing his old favorite, China Life Insurance. The line chart indicated that China Life had nearly completed its consolidation phase and was set to rise by at least 30% in the near future. Compared to small-cap stocks, Li Yueqi now preferred trading large-cap stocks, especially blue chips. The reason was simple. While small-cap stocks surged quickly and were easier to rally, his current capital was too massive and his attention span too limited to manage multiple stocks simultaneously. Focusing on just one or two small-cap stocks made him vulnerable to manipulation. If market makers spotted large funds entering or exiting, they might reverse their positions outright, dumping shares and forcing Li Yueqi to absorb the sell-off. After all, the future line charts only reflected outcomes without his interference. Though the data adjusted daily, even the slightest change in the capital markets, like a butterfly flapping its wings in South America, could trigger a storm. Every minor shift was enough to alter the day's results. Li Yueqi, fighting alone, found it increasingly difficult to manage everything as his capital grew. Several instances had already occurred where his own operations affected the chart results. Although no losses have been incurred yet, it was inevitable that profits would be divided and diluted when exiting positions. No wonder large funds always require a skilled trading team and diversified investments. This is the only way to effectively mitigate risks and avoid falling into traps set by others. It seems some expenses just can't be cut. Li Yueqi resolved that even if he could grasp the broader trends of the future, he couldn't possibly cover every detail. He decided to establish a financial investment company and assemble a trading team to collectively execute his operational plans. Only then could the future charts be utilized more effectively to maximize profits. Today's trading was particularly challenging. The market's upward momentum slowed, and stock selection became difficult. Simply hoping to ride the wave and reap rewards wasn't realistic. Overall, today's returns were only about 5%, marking the lowest daily yield Li Yueqi had achieved since using the future charts. During dinner, the Audi dealership called Li Jianmin to inform him that the Audi he had ordered had arrived and to arrange a pickup at his earliest convenience. Upon hearing the news, Li Jianmin was thrilled and immediately took 2 days off from work, planning to pick up the car the next day. Li Yueqi suggested to his mom that she also take time off, as the funds he had transferred would be available the next day. He wanted both parents to accompany him to the securities company where their accounts were held to finalize the margin trading procedures. From then on, he would take over the management of these accounts, and they could simply check the daily returns online. If they needed money, they could withdraw it directly without consulting him. Since these arrangements had already been discussed with his parents, they agreed without much hesitation. On the 8th of the month, the Li family went to the dealership to pick up their car, which already had its license plate and insurance processed. To their surprise, a small delivery ceremony was held. Guided by the staff, Li Jianmin popped a bottle of champagne, non-alcoholic of course, as drinking and driving don't mix. The Li family, sales staff, and dealership manager clinked glasses together, after which the staff briefed them on maintenance and after-sale services, marking the beginning of the car's life with the Li family. Then, Li Jianmin drove straight to the nearest gas station. Phew! The stinginess of the store was well known. As expected, the fuel left in the tank was barely enough to get them to the nearest gas station. After filling up, Li Jianmin excitedly sped off in his beloved car. Witnessing their usually stern father act so childishly, Li Yueqi and Zhou Xiaoping could only look at each other in speechless amusement. Smoothly arriving at Junin Securities, the brokerage where Li Jianmin and Zhou Xiaoping had opened their accounts, Li Yueqi had already transferred the 20 million withdrawn the previous day into his parents' custody accounts. After stating their purpose to the reception, their customer service manager received the family of 3. To their surprise, Li Jianmin and Zhou Xiaoping's customer service manager turned out to be the same person, a man in his 30s named Feng Lei. After inquiring about the trio's purpose for visiting, Fong Lei learned that this married couple had been long-term investors under his management for years. Given the recent favorable market conditions, seeing dormant accounts reactivate like this was quite common. Moreover, many customers were reopening their accounts to restart margin trading services. At the very least, Fong Lei himself had already handled several such cases among the accounts he managed. Securing double the financing was easy to negotiate, with the fee rate set at the most standard level. However, he was utterly shocked by the massive investment of 20 million yuan. According to his records, this couple were just ordinary corporate employees with modest monthly salaries. Moreover, their account had been inactive for years. How could they suddenly produce 20 million yuan to invest in the stock market? But these were matters beyond the authority of Fong Lei, a mere account manager. He had no right to pry into a client's privacy. What business was it of his where someone else's money came from? His job was simply to handle the transactions properly. Chapter 17. Pressured to get married again. Chapter 17. Pestered about marriage again after assisting his parents with setting up their margin trading accounts. It was already noon. The family of three then went to the most renowned Sichuan restaurant in town for lunch. Midway through the meal, Li Yueqi received a call from Zhongzhou. It turned out to be the driving school he had registered with, informing him that the latest session of the driver's license training course he signed up for would start next Monday. They asked if he would be available to attend the training. Li Yueqi explained the details to his parents. Upon learning that their son wanted to get a driver's license, his mother didn't press him to stay longer. She just asked him to stay home for 2 more days and return over the weekend. Li Yueqi first replied to the driving school, explaining that due to work commitments, he would only be available for training after 4 p.m. each weekday and on weekends. The driving school responded that this was easily accommodated. Their premium executive program was designed around flexibility, with instructors available on demand for students. They assured him that a coach would be arranged whenever he arrived. Li Yueqi scheduled his first session for the following Monday, confirming he would attend the driving school then. After finalizing the driving school arrangements, Li Yueqi said to Zhou Xiaoping, "Mom, how about this? Instead of me going back on the weekend, since you two have already taken 2 days off and still have tomorrow left, let Dad drive us all straight to Zhongzhou tomorrow morning. The 3 of us can spend 3 days together in Zhongzhou, and you and Dad can drive back on Sunday. Won't interfere with work on Monday. I've got a place to stay there. The homestay I rented has 2 bedrooms and a living room. It's just been me living there, so bedding and everything else are ready. Just needs a quick tidy up and it's good to go. If we visit any scenic spots, we could just book a hotel nearby. Let's treat this as our family's first road trip. What do you think?" Zhou Xiaoping was quite tempted, but still a bit concerned. Going for a couple of days wouldn't be a problem. Your dad's been driving for years, and new cars don't really need a break-in period these days. But aren't you trading stocks? Don't you need to keep an eye on the market? Li Yueqi smiled and said, "Mom, don't worry. It's a bull market right now. Even if the few stocks I pick drop, they won't fall much. There's always money to be made in the stock market. When I get back this afternoon, I'll adjust my portfolio. At worst, I'll just earn a bit less. No losses here. As my capital grows, doing short-term trades and chasing daily limit-ups like before won't be practical anymore. I'll focus more on swing trading instead, not fussing over daily ups and downs." Seeing her son's confident attitude, Zhou Xiaoping didn't press further. Li Jianmin had long wanted to take the family on a road trip by driving himself, and this was their first attempt, so he was quite excited. He nodded in agreement. After lunch, Li Jianmin drove the car back to their residential neighborhood. Although an Audi isn't exactly a luxury car, a brand new one still stood out in their old community. Since everyone in the factory compound knew each other well, many people stopped to greet them along the way, surprised to see Li Jianmin behind the wheel. "Brother Jianmin, is this your new car?" a co-worker asked. Li Jianmin also responded warmly, "Yes, I just picked it up at 4 o'clock today." As he spoke, he turned to Zhou Xiaoping and Li Yueqi, saying, "Already home, you two go on ahead. I've got some things to take care of, and we'll be back a bit later." Li Yueqi understood exactly what his father meant by those words. It was simply a way to show off to his old friends. Though he found it exasperating, he didn't deliberately try to ruin his father's moment of triumph. Because based on past experience, if he made his father unhappy, his father would ensure he had absolutely no peace left to enjoy. Li Yueqi recalled the unpleasant memories from his childhood and shuddered with discomfort. Without hesitation, he pulled his mother off the car, leaving his father alone to bask in his moment of glory. Zhou Xiaoping was pulled out of the car by her son, but didn't say much. Instead, she called a mahjong friend and then said to Li Yueqi, "You go home first. I've got something to do as well. Make dinner yourself tonight, or you can wait for your dad to come back." Li Yueqi was left speechless. His mom, taking advantage of this rare free time, was going to meet up with friends to play mahjong. It was her biggest personal hobby, and once she started, she could play all day. Women of his mother's age were all addicted to mahjong. Though the stakes weren't high, it was just a way to kill time. It had been like this when he was still in school, and nothing had changed since. Li Yueqi didn't want to spoil his parents' fun, so he went home alone. When he arrived, he saw there was still time before the afternoon stock market session opened. He first pulled up a web page to browse the news. As someone who traded stocks, he was keenly interested in the news. Any policy shifts could greatly affect stock price fluctuations. Although he had access to the stock chart, he still wanted to analyze the reasons behind the ups and downs of these stocks. It wasn't enough to know what was happening. He wanted to understand why. After staring at it for a while without gaining any new insight, he opened the Yida Stock Analysis app on his phone to continue studying today's charts. Following his original strategy, he didn't look for stocks with drastic short-term volatility in the coming days, but instead picked out several steadily rising trend-based stocks. In the afternoon after the market opened, he began his operations, selling off several stocks that had risen too sharply while continuing to invest in his old standbys, China Life Insurance and CRRC. He had noticed that starting from the second half of the month, the broader market would enter a noticeable correction period, and only these two stocks showed relatively stable growth. Additionally, given these were mega-cap stocks, his modest capital wouldn't cause excessive volatility in their prices. At the same time, I opened Dad and Mom's accounts, went all in on China Life Insurance and CSR Corporation at the dip, and after completing these operations, I just had to watch the three accounts patiently and wait for the results. After the stock market closed, Li Yueqi played some video games for a while before his father came home. It appeared his father thoroughly enjoyed the admiration and flattery from others. After glancing around the house and not spotting Zhou Xiaoping, he asked Li Yueqi, "Where's your mom? Did she go out to play mahjong again?" Li Yueqi replied, "Yeah, that's right. I was called away as soon as I got off the bus." Li Jianmin knew his wife had this habit, but still grumbled. "Honestly, with so much housework waiting, you never lift a finger, always running off to play mahjong. What's so fun about it anyway?" Li Yueqi stayed silent, wisely choosing not to engage. His parents' squabbles were best left alone, a painful lesson he learned the hard way growing up. His father glanced at Li Yueqi gaming and couldn't resist another complaint. "And you, grown man still glued to video games all day. Look at old Zhang's son, next door, already bringing his girlfriend home. You're the same age. Where's yours?" Li Yueqi replied, "I've been too busy lately. These things depend on fate. We'll just have to let it happen naturally." His father persisted. "How can you meet anyone when you're just staying home playing games all day? Our family conditions weren't good before, but now that we're better off, your mother and I plan to arrange matchmaking for you. You should prepare yourself." Li Yueqi felt another headache coming on. Without saying much, he brushed aside the topic of arranged meetings. He could only hope to find some way to dodge the situation when the time came. Chapter 18. Interesting Tales from Zhongzhou. Chapter 18. Zhongzhou Anecdote. Because Li Yueqi deliberately avoided the topic, Li Jianmin didn't continue with the matchmaking discussion and instead turned to the kitchen to prepare dinner. Truth be told, Dad's cooking was actually better than Mom's. At least that's what Li Yueqi believed. It's just that Dad was usually too busy, so there were few chances to taste his culinary skills. Today, Dad was in high spirits after driving his beloved new car for the first time and even took the rare initiative to cook dinner. Just as dinner was ready, Mom returned right on time from her mahjong game, perfectly catching the meal. Li Yueqi and his mother were both delighted to have their taste buds satisfied. Early the next morning after breakfast, the whole family was about to embark on their first road trip. Since their main destination was Zhongzhou, the provincial capital, it would only be about an hour and a half's drive via the highway. Most necessities could be bought as needed along the way, so there was no need to pack too much. The family of three simply prepared a few essentials before setting off. Since it wasn't a holiday season, the roads weren't particularly busy. Li Jianmin swiftly got onto the highway, and soon the speedometer reached 120 kilometers per hour as they headed north. This was a scenic highway leading directly to a tourist area, with towering mountains and dense forests lining both sides of the road. Li Yueqi watched as the scenery outside the window swiftly flashed by. After passing through a 3-kilometer-long tunnel, Zhengzhou City was not far away. Exiting the highway, they entered the ring road and the car slowed down. The towering mountains gave way to skyscrapers, and the flow of vehicles and pedestrians gradually increased. Li Jianmin had driven to Zhengzhou many times, but this was his first visit to the urban village where Li Yueqi lived. After confirming the route via the navigation system, the car continued onward and soon reached the urban village on the northern ring of Zhengzhou. Li Jianmin parked the car at a nearby parking spot, and the family of 3 walked toward the guest house Li Yueqi rented. Although situated near the urban village, the guest house was actually part of a high-end residential complex, offering excellent sanitation and security, a stark contrast to the noisy urban village outside. Li Yueqi brought his parents to his rented apartment. Since he lived alone, the place was slightly messy. While the living room was passable, the bedroom was cluttered with instant noodles, snacks, and happy water soda strewn about. Zhou Xiaoping and Li Jianmin frowned upon seeing this, clearly dissatisfied with their son's untidiness. Zhou Xiaoping tidied up as she nagged. You're a grown man now, yet you live in such squalor, stuffing everything into your bedroom like the trash bin. We're about to arrange a blind date for you, and girls these days prefer clean boys. If they see how you live, they probably turn right around and leave. Li Jianmin chimed in, your mom's right. Just look at what you usually eat. Instant noodles, soda, bread, all junk food. We're not saying you have to cook, but there are plenty of restaurants right outside the neighborhood. Food is just a short walk away. How lazy can you be if you won't even go downstairs to eat? That junk isn't healthy. Keep eating like this, and sooner or later, you'll make yourself sick. Facing this parental double team, Li Yueqi had no defense and could only frantically apologize, repeating, Okay, yes, I'll change right away next time. In truth, Li Yueqi usually paid attention to personal hygiene, and his apartment was fairly clean. But this time, things had been urgent. He had sensed something off in his mother's tone on the phone and rushed home immediately. As a result, the accumulated trash from the past few days hadn't been cleaned up yet. As for all that junk food, Li Yueqi had stock quotes to watch all day. He rarely had time for a proper lunch at noon, so he just grabbed whatever was handy at the homestay. That's how he ended up stockpiling a mountain of instant noodles and soda. However, when caught in the wrong by one's parents, faced with the undeniable fact of one's own mistake, the wisest course is not to indulge in any explanations or rebuttals. Instead, immediately offer a sincere apology and pledge never to repeat the offense. Otherwise, the more one tries to justify, the more flaws will emerge, and the deeper the wrongdoing becomes. If parents seize upon even greater evidence of wrongdoing, any attempt to explain or argue will be interpreted as insincere repentance, escalating the conflict, potentially even triggering physical punishment. This, too, was a lesson Li Yueqi learned through countless painful experiences. When it comes to parents' words, even if you disagree, never talk back. How could Li Jianmin and Zhou Xiaoping fail to notice their son's perfunctory response? Having been through that phase themselves, they understood all too well how young people handle parental advice, letting the words go in one ear and out the other, nodding politely but never acting on them. A grown-up son no longer follows his mother's will. Young people have their own ideas. Besides, with such professional success, why would he heed his parents' nagging? Only by raising a child does one understand a parent's love. Perhaps only when he marries and starts his own family will he finally grasp the depth of his parents' devotion. Li Yueqi's bedroom didn't really need much tidying up. Aside from being slightly messy due to his hasty departure, everything else was in good order. After helping her son clean up, Zhou Xiaoping went to sort out the other bedroom. The other bedroom already had a large bed with quilts and mattresses ready, though they had been stored away and used. Li Yueqi rarely entered this bedroom normally, at most opening the windows for ventilation or giving it a quick sweep. So with just a bit of cleaning, it would be ready for someone to stay. By the time everything was settled, it was already noon. Li Yueqi took his parents downstairs and hailed a taxi, which twisted and turned until they arrived at a French restaurant called Fleur de Paris. That's right, he planned to treat his parents to a grand French meal to welcome them properly. Normally, this high-end restaurant required advance reservations. But when Li Yueqi produced his Shangri-La Platinum card, all obstacles instantly melted away. 13 courses of French cuisine were served in meticulous succession. Bouillabaisse, escargots à la bourguignon, French onion soup, foie gras, and an array of pastries I couldn't even name, plus a bottle of French red wine. Though the meal wasn't particularly tasty, the pretentiousness factor was sky high. The bill came to 600 per head, 1,800 renminbi, for 3 people. Only later did I learn that French restaurants charge per guest. My first visit certainly educated me. After enjoying a lavish French lunch, Li Yueqi took his parents shopping, stopping by a luxury boutique. He had hoped to surprise his mother by buying her some high-end luxury items. But upon seeing the price tags, Zhou Xiaoping immediately dragged her husband and son away. She simply wasn't the type to splurge on luxury goods. Spending tens of thousands on a purse struck her as utterly foolish. Whoever else wanted to waste their money could go right ahead, but there was no way she'd indulge, she firmly declared. Li Yueqi's attempt at flattery had backfired. After apologizing to the shop staff, he reluctantly followed his parents out. Chapter 19, A Happy Weekend. Chapter 19, The Happy Weekend. After leaving the luxury store, Zhou Xiaoping walked ahead in silence, her face icy cold. Li Yueqi knew his mother was angry and quietly followed behind her with his head lowered. When mom gets mad, even breathing feels like a mistake. The best approach is to stay silent, seize the right moment to sincerely apologize and hope for her forgiveness. In Zhou Xiaoping's habitual worldview, money at the level of tens of thousands of yuan was typically reserved for major events like weddings, business ventures, or medical treatments. Therefore, she could accept a fur coat costing a few thousand yuan, but found a 30,000 yuan handbag unacceptable, even though the difference didn't seem that substantial. Changing her mother's mindset would take time, so Li Yueqi decided not to argue. Instead, he would subtly influence them, allowing his parents to gradually come to terms with the fact that their family was now wealthy. Li Yueqi hurried a couple steps forward and grasped his mother's hand, saying pleadingly, "Mom, I was wrong. I shouldn't have dragged you here to see things you don't like. From now on, we'll only buy stuff you and Dad like, okay?" Li Jianmin also came up to persuade Zhou Xiaoping, saying, "Your son just wanted to make you happy. How did you end up getting angry?" Zhou Xiaoping realized that Li Yueqi had deliberately twisted her reluctance to buy something due to its high price and her not liking it. Her expression softened slightly. Seeing his mother's anger dissipate, Li Yueqi became even more eager to please, accompanying his parents to tour various scenic spots around Zhongzhou. The Urki Pagoda, the museum, the botanical garden, the holiday tower, and more, all of which bore the footprints of the Li family. Zhou Xiaoping even took many photos with her phone, ensuring she had plenty of material for her social media updates. As they strolled around, evening fell. Li Yueqi asked his parents, "What should we have for dinner? Should we try something special?" Li Jianmin said, "What's so special about it? I didn't even taste anything special in that French lunch. It just can't compare to our Sichuan, Shandong, or Cantonese cuisine." Zhou Xiaoping also agreed. "Yes, I didn't find that French food tasty either. It's nowhere near as satisfying as our Chinese meals. I guess I just can't get used to foreign food." Seeing his parents' reaction, Li Yueqi quickly added, "That French food was just for trying something different. Who would eat it every day? How about something homemade for dinner? There's a great Sichuan restaurant near where I live. Shall we go there?" Upon hearing about home-style cooking, Zhou Xiaoping and Li Jianmin immediately agreed. Indeed, Sichuan cuisine still best suits the taste of us Chinese, and the Li family of 3 was no exception. 4 dishes and a soup cost just over 100 yuan, yet the flavors were utterly authentic, leaving the parents effusive with praise and Li Yueqi rather pleased. Good food lifts the spirits. This saying certainly holds true. A mere 100 yuan Sichuan meal accomplished what thousands or even tens of thousands had failed to achieve before. After dinner, Li Yueqi accompanied his parents for a stroll through the bustling urban streets. The clamor of vendors hawking their wares, the sounds of passing cars, and the haggling voices all melded together into the vibrant pulse of everyday life. Li Yueqi explained to his parents that living alone, with no relatives nearby, he'd struggle if not for this lively atmosphere. Staying cooped up in his room would inevitably take its toll. That was why he loved this place. It was filled with young people striving every day. Though outwardly chaotic, it brimmed with hope and promise. Being among them helped him maintain a youthful mindset. Li Jianmin and Zhou Xiaoping neither agreed nor disagreed with Li Yueqi's words, but as night had fallen, the three returned straight to the hostel to prepare for bed. The next morning, Li Yueqi woke from his sleep to find his parents already gone from the room. He quickly called his father, who picked up after just 2 rings. Li Yueqi asked, "Dad, where did you go? You're not in the house." Li Jianmin replied, "Haven't you checked the time? You woke up so late. Your mom and I didn't want to disturb you, so we went out for a stroll around the neighborhood. I discovered there's a park west of your residential area. Your mom and I are now watching people dance there. Do you want to join us?" Hearing his father's words, Li Yueqi realized the time. Glancing at his watch, he saw it was nearly 8 o'clock. No wonder his dad said he'd slept in. He immediately called back, "All right, wait for me. I'm coming down now." Truth be told, Li Yueqi wasn't deliberately sleeping in. He regarded Yida market analysis as his biggest secret and ultimate trump card. To maintain confidentiality, most of his stock selection and analysis work had to be done alone at night, which inevitably led to late nights and, accordingly, late mornings. Li Yueqi changed his clothes and freshened up, then immediately went downstairs to the park his father had mentioned. The park was not far from the residential area where the homestay was located, just a few hundred meters away, and it was called Shangyun Park. The park was small, but there were quite a few people exercising there, mostly middle-aged and elderly. Young people were too busy with work and careers to have time for strolls in the park. However, since it was a Saturday, there were still quite a few people in the park, some practicing martial arts, others dancing or playing ball, and even more working out on the public exercise equipment. Li Yueqi spotted his mother stretching her legs and twisting her waist on one of the machines. He approached her and asked, "Mom, what time did you come down? Have you eaten yet?" Zhou Xiaoping continued her exercises as she answered, "Your place is next to the morning market. It's a bit noisy. Your dad and I came down before 7. We haven't had breakfast yet, waiting to eat with you." Li Yueqi scanned the surroundings but didn't see his father anywhere. So he turned to his mother and asked, "Where's Dad?" Zhou Xiaoping got off the equipment and also looked around. "She was just here. Come on, let's go find her." Shangyun Park was a small place, making it easy to find someone. After walking around for a while, Li Yueqi and Zhou Xiaoping spotted Li Jianmin, not exercising as expected, but engrossed in a game of chess with onlookers gathered around. No wonder they couldn't find him earlier. Li Yueqi knew his father was a chess enthusiast who couldn't resist stopping for a game wherever he encountered one, ready to play a few rounds with anyone. Unfortunately, his skills were limited. He was what you'd call a stinker at chess. Back when Li Yueqi was 6 or 7, he learned chess from his dad and used to lose constantly, thinking his father was a master. But once he entered middle school and discovered various chess software, he began playing online. After just a few months of practice, his father could never beat him again. But this time, Dad's opponent didn't seem particularly skilled either. They were evenly matched, like finding one's equal in chess or a worthy adversary in battle, while a noisy crowd of onlookers chimed in with unsolicited advice. After about 15 minutes, both sides had depleted their attacking pieces and settled for a respectful draw. The two players exchanged a glance, mutual admiration evident in their expressions. Li Yueqi couldn't help feeling exasperated. At this level, he could have defeated Dad's opponent within minutes if he were playing. But seeing how much his father was enjoying himself, he didn't intervene. After all, the joy of chess lies in playing against someone of comparable skill, just like how Dad had stopped playing with him ever since 8th grade, when he'd started winning consistently. Why would anyone keep playing if they can never win? The inevitable outcome of always winning is that, over time, no one wants to play with you anymore. Chapter 20. Sightseeing in Bianjing. Chapter 20. Sightseeing in Bianjing. Playing 2 games of chess, Dad won one and tied the other, putting him in an excellent mood. After bidding farewell to his opponent, he left with his wife and children. Li Yueqi, seeing his parents thoroughly enjoying themselves, lured them further. Dad, Mom, what do you think? Not a bad place, right? How about you both quit your jobs, retire early, and let me buy a house nearby for you? You could spend your golden years here. All of us living together as a family. What do you say? Zhou Xiaoping glanced at her son, knowing full well he was trying to persuade them to retire again. It's too crowded and noisy here, she said mildly, and we don't know anyone around. It's fine for a few days, but we'd feel miserable staying long term. Besides, your father and I aren't that old yet. We're not ready to retire. Li Yueqi continued. This area is bustling because it's near the urban village and the Carrefour supermarket. There's a residential area to the west, far from the village. Although there are no new houses there, it's quite easy to buy a second-hand one. Besides, Zhongzhou is a big city with much better medical and other facilities compared to Pingshan. Why don't you reconsider? Zhou Xiaoping said, I know what you're thinking, but you haven't settled down yet. Aren't you planning to start a company next? Have you decided where to set it up? If we move to Zhongzhou, what if you then decide to relocate to another big city? Wait until your plans are settled, and after you're married and have children. Then your father and I can come to help take care of the kids. Li Jianmin chimed in, your mother is right. Whenever you get married and have children, we'll retire and come help take care of them together. At least we'll have something to do. Li Yueqi noticed the conversation had circled back to the topic of pressuring him to marry. However, he had just turned 22 last year and wouldn't even be 23 until October. Was a marriage a bit too soon? But he didn't dare say it out loud, as it would only make persuading his parents even harder. Li Yueqi also found it strange. Before he went to college, his parents and school had always been on guard against him having an early romance. Back in high school, one of the 5 major disciplinary offenses, punishable by immediate expulsion, was boys and girls dating. So why was it that the moment he entered university, society seemed to do a complete 180? Suddenly, being single made you worse off than a dog. If you could bring home a girlfriend during college, your parents would be overjoyed and would practically push you to get married immediately. But if you graduate without finding a partner, your family will nag you about marriage endlessly. No matter what topic you start with, the conversation will inevitably circle back to urging you to tie the knot. After all, Li Yueqi was a vigorous young man. How could he not have any thoughts about his other half? Yet during his 4 years of university, he remained single all that time like a monk in celibacy. And after graduation, he spent another half year holed up at home trading stocks. When it came to women, he barely knew how to approach or woo them. Sigh. It seemed he really needed to put in some effort in this area from now on. The 3 of them chatted all the way and found a breakfast shop by the roadside for a meal. Zhongzhou's breakfast offerings were quite diverse. Fried dough sticks, steamed buns, spicy soup, and savory tofu pudding, all of which tasted excellent. As they sipped their spicy soup and nibbled on steamed buns and fried pancakes, they discussed their itinerary for the day. Li Jianmin planned to take Zhou Xiaoping and Li Yueqi to visit the Millennium City Park in Bianjing. Meanwhile, Li Jianmin's second elder brother, Li Yueqi's second uncle, had been doing business in Bianjing and had repeatedly invited the Li family over. Since Zhongzhou was very close to Bianjing, it would be a good opportunity to visit. Neither Zhou Xiaoping nor Li Yueqi had any objections to Li Jianmin's arrangements. After breakfast, the family prepared for their trip to Bianjing. In recent years, Henan Province had been promoting the integration of Zhongzhou and Bianjing, strengthening the ties between the 2 cities. The traffic on the Zhongzhou-Bianjing Expressway was much heavier than on the previous Zhongzhou-Yaozhou Expressway, and it took Li Jianmin about 40 minutes by car to reach Bianjing. Bianjing was an ancient capital spanning 7 dynasties, most notably serving as the capital of the Northern Song dynasty. Its recorded history as a capital dates back to the Warring States period, when it was the capital of the Wei state, known as Dalian. However, Bianjing's most celebrated era was undoubtedly the Northern Song dynasty. Although the Song emperors were not particularly remarkable, the city was home to many famous scholars, statesmen, and nobles. Legendary figures like the brilliantly talented Su Shi, the incorruptible Bao Zheng, the visionary Fan Zhongyan, and the reformist Wang Engshi had all left their marks in Bianjing. Even today, remnants of its glorious past could be glimpsed at landmarks like the Xiangwu Temple, the Dragon Pavilion, and the Iron Pagoda. Li Yueqi's family was visiting the Qingming Riverside Landscape Garden today. It was Saturday, and the scenic spot was crowded with tourists. At the entrance, Hanfu costumes were available for rent for free, but since it was already deep winter, wearing traditional outfits for sightseeing would have been too cold. Nevertheless, many fashion-over-comfort young women braved the chilly wind, shivering in their thin Hanfu as they toured the garden. The ancient buildings in the Qingming Riverside Landscape Garden are all replicas from later generations. The main attraction is the various performances, such as the defense of Tokyo, military drills on the battlefield, and the Liangshan heroes rescue the condemned. The most interesting one, however, is the throwing the embroidered ball for marriage at the Wang family's estate. Li Yueqi's mother nudged him forward, and the actress on the upstairs balcony threw the embroidered ball right into his hands. With his parents as witnesses, Li Yueqi, dressed in a groom's outfit, participated in a mock wedding ceremony with the actress, while two maids scattered candies beside them. Though it was just a performance, his parents laughed heartily and grew even more eager for the day their son would truly marry. After the game was over, Li Yueqi went downstairs and asked his parents, "Dad, Mom, how did I do?" Dad smiled and said, not bad at all. It looks just like the real thing. Consider this a rehearsal, and you'll get used to it when you actually get married." Mom also said with a smile, "How about it, Yueqi? Feels pretty good, doesn't it? Find yourself a wife soon. Then you can really have your wedding night." Li Yueqi had anticipated that such a performance would inevitably lead to his mother pushing him to get married, but he was used to it. Participating in a performance to make his parents happy was quite nice. Who knew how long he'd have to wait for his real wedding? The family of three spent the morning at the riverside scene at Qingming Park and had lunch there. Surprisingly, despite being such a popular tourist attraction, the food prices weren't excessively high, about the same as outside the park. Sigh, these days it's rare enough for a tourist spot to be praised for not ripping people off, which just goes to show how much of a scam most attractions normally are. After lunch, they watched two more performances, and by the time they finished, it was already past 3 in the afternoon. The family left Riverside Scene at Qingming Park and headed to the home of Li Yueqi's second uncle, Li Weimin. Li Weimin had received a call from Li Jianmin earlier in the day, saying that his younger brother and his family were coming to visit. He was overjoyed. Ever since their father passed away, work had kept the brothers apart for years. Today's reunion was something to cherish. Chapter 21, Visiting Uncle Tu's House. Chapter 21, Visiting Second Uncle's House. Though Li Jianmin and Li Weimin were brothers by blood, showing up empty-handed was never an option. As the saying goes, one can never go wrong with more courtesy. Accompanied by his parents, Li Yueqi stopped by a supermarket to stock up on groceries and even bought 2 bottles of Matai liquor. The family then drove to the residential complex where Li Weimin lived. Li Weimin received a phone call from his younger brother at noon, so he skipped work in the afternoon and waited at home for his brother's family. Upon hearing they had arrived, he immediately took his wife downstairs to greet them. As soon as they met, Li Weimin noticed that his younger brother had arrived driving an Audi, clearly a brand new one at that. Though puzzled, he thought it inappropriate to ask about it at the moment. Instead, he waved at his brother's family and called out, "Jianmin, over here, pull up this way." Spotting Li Weimin, Li Jianmin immediately steered the car toward where his older brother was gesturing. After the car stopped, Li Weimin was the first to come over and call out, "Jianmin, Xiaoping." At the same time, Li Weimin and Shun Yuhua took the gift from Li Jianmin and Zhou Xiaoping's hands, muttering, "We didn't need to bring so much since you're already here." Li Yueqi, however, pursed his lips on the side. He thought, if they had really come empty-handed, his second uncle might not have said anything, but his second aunt would definitely have been displeased deep down. He knew Shin Yuhua's temperament all too well. She came from a prominent family in Bianjing, with elders who held official positions. His second uncle was practically a live-in son-in-law. He had even seen their household register, where Shin Yuhua's name was listed as the head of the family. Several years ago, when Grandpa was ill, second Aunt Shun Yuhua had repeatedly claimed she was too busy and never once visited. It wasn't until after Grandpa passed away that she showed up to play the grieving relative, wailing like the heavens and earth were moved. But what was the point of putting on such an act when the man was already gone? In any case, Li Yueqi had never liked this always fashionably dressed second aunt since childhood. He always felt she was hypocritical, treating people with a false warmth. Still, his second uncle was decent, treating his own family quite well, and out of respect for him, Li Yueqi couldn't afford to argue with second aunt. Li Weimin and Li Jianmin entered the house chatting and laughing along the way. Li Weimin's family was much better off than his own family had been before, with several properties to their name, including a small villa. Having done business in Bianjing for decades, Li Weimin had managed to accumulate quite a fortune. Li Jianmin was welcomed into Li Weimin's living room. Although Li Yueqi had some reservations about his second aunt, Shen Yuhua, the necessary courtesy and decorum still had to be maintained on the surface. Otherwise, people might say they lack proper upbringing. After everyone took their seats, Li Weimin glanced at the clock on the wall and asked curiously, "Jianmin, Xiaoping, why did you arrive so late? Was there something that delayed you on the way?" Li Jianmin replied, "No, actually we came this morning. Yueqi insisted on going to the riverside scene at Qingming Festival Garden. So Xiaoqing and I accompanied him there for half the day. We came straight here right after leaving." "Oh, you came from Pingshan this morning? Then you won't have much time to explore," Li Weimin continued inquiring. Li Jianmin smiled and replied, "Actually no, we arrived in Zhongzhou this morning. Yueqi works in Zhongzhou and rented a large guest house where we stayed last night. The day before yesterday, we picked up the car from the 4S dealership. Yueqi said new cars need a break-in period, so we decided to make a road trip out of it. Xiaoping and I also wanted to see how Yueqi was living. We arrived in Zhongzhou yesterday morning, spent the whole day sightseeing, and stayed at his place last night. Originally, I planned to head back today, but Yueqi said he missed his uncle and aunt, so we came here today." Upon hearing his father's words, Li Yueqi silently grumbled to himself, "I don't miss my aunt at all. If I did, I wouldn't have gone to Bianzhou to play first before visiting her place in the afternoon." Shen Yuhua also asked, "That Audi, did you buy it? It must have been quite expensive, right?" Zhou Xiaoping chimed in, "That's right. We placed the order on New Year's Day, and Yueqi paid in full. The total came to over 400,000 yuan, and we just picked up the actual car the day before yesterday." Shen Yuan knew her nephew had been squeezed out of the civil service exam by someone else. Having graduated only months ago, how could he possibly afford such an expensive car? Had he won a lottery? Surprised, she asked, "What does Guiki do in Zhongzhou? How is he able to buy such a pricey car after just 6 months?" Li Yueqi originally didn't want to show off his wealth and intended to gloss over it. But his mother, Zhou Xiaoping, couldn't help boasting a little. He had a job before, but quit after just a few days, always reassuring his father and me that he was doing well and that his boss admired him. After trading stocks in Zhongzhou for half a year, he came back during New Year's Day, insisting on buying us a house and a car. During those few days, he first bought his dad an Audi, then paid in full for a 350 square meter duplex in Pingshan. He spent over 2 million in just a few days, really has no idea how hard it is to earn money nowadays. Li Yueqi knew his mother's vanity was flaring up again. Previously, though his family background wasn't exactly poor, it couldn't compare to Shen Yuhua's status. Shen Yuhua came from an aristocratic family in Bianjing, spoiled and pampered since childhood. Though outwardly polite, she always carried an air of superiority in her interactions, which rubbed the female relatives of the Li family the wrong way. Now that her son had graduated from college and, within just half a year, could afford to buy the family a house and a car, she naturally wanted to show off to Shen Yuhua. Shen Yuhua exclaimed in shock, "Stock trading? Last year's market was good, but I heard very few actually made money. It was mostly the index soaring while individual stocks languished. How much did Yueqi invest to afford buying a house and car worth over 2 million? Shen Yuhua was also a seasoned stock trader, having started in the 1990s. However, despite his long experience, his skills were mediocre at best. Several times, the money he invested ended up trapped in the market. Zhou Xiaoping added, "I didn't give him much money, just the 40,000 to 50,000 he had saved up himself. I don't know how he managed it, but in just a few months, he turned that into so much." Shen Yuhua and Li Weimin were utterly stunned. They knew the current market was favorable, but the money for the house and car clearly wasn't the full amount. From Zhou Xiaoping's tone, Li Yueqi must have made at least tens of millions in assets over those months to spend so lavishly. How could the third brother's son be this capable? In just a few months, he multiplied his wealth hundreds of times over. Li Yueqi immediately took up the conversation, It's not as impressive as my mom makes it sound. It was pure luck. The market's been doing well these past 6 months, and I happened to bet on a few bullish stocks. Plus, I used very high leverage, which amplified the gains. That's how I managed to make so much money. Now that the brokerage has forced me to reduce leverage, it won't be so easy to earn like this in the future. Li Weimin and Shen Yuhua knew that Li Yueqi had never been one to boast since childhood. He was extremely low-key. Back when he got into a provincial 211 university, he didn't even tell anyone. Later, when he took the civil service exam and scored first in the written test and second in the interview, a near-guaranteed pass, he still kept it quiet. This was completely different from his mother Zhou Xiaoping's blunt and outspoken personality. But this time, their nephew had truly pulled off something extraordinary, multiplying his assets hundreds of times in just a few months. Even in a bull market, few people had this kind of talent. It seemed the third brother's family was really on the rise. They'd have to stay in closer touch from now on. Chapter 22, Mom's Concern. Chapter 22, Mother's Concern. After Zhou Xiaoping finished showing off her son, she continued to ask Shen Yuhua, "What about Li Zheng? I heard he's about to graduate with his master's degree, right?" Shen Yuhua said he graduated last year and has been working on projects with his advisor's team. After the project succeeded, his advisor offered him direct admission to a PhD program, paving the way for a future academic career. Li Weimin and Shen Yuhua's son, Li Zheng, was 2 years older than Li Yueqi and also very ambitious. Although he only got into a provincial college during the college entrance exams, he later pursued his graduate studies at Zhongzhou University, making him Li Yueqi's former schoolmate. The relationship between Li Zheng and Li Yueqi was quite good. Back when Li Yueqi's grandparents were still alive, the children of the Li siblings were still young. During summer vacations, when there was no one to look after the kids, the Li brothers and sisters would send their sons and daughters to their rural hometown to be taken care of by the grandparents, picking them up again when summer break ended. As a result, the relationship among the cousins in the Li family remained very close. Especially since Li Zheng was the oldest among them, came from a well-off family, and wasn't arrogant like their second aunt, they all loved playing with him. Later, as they went their separate ways, some to school, some to the military, and others to work, they saw each other less frequently. However, the siblings maintained a small WeChat group where they kept in touch regularly, sharing secrets they didn't want their parents to know. Shen Yuhua also spoke of her son with great pride. The third generation of the Li family had all managed to do quite well for themselves. Previously, the least successful among them, Li Yueqi, had somehow amassed a fortune worth tens of millions in just half a year. It seemed the feng shui of the Li family's ancestral graves might truly be exceptional. Upon hearing that his nephew seemed to have a remarkable talent for stock trading, Li Weimin asked directly, "Yueqi, your aunt, and I have a few $100,000 tied up in stocks. Would you mind taking a look for us?" Without any pretense, Li Yueqi replied, "Sure, which stock did you buy? Let me take a look." Li Weimin and Shen Yuhua quickly opened their computer and the trading software, while Li Jianmin and Zhou Xiaoping also gathered around to see how their son would analyze the situation. Li Yueqi first analyzed the broader market, stating, "Firstly, this year is a bull market, which is evident from the previous frenzied rise in brokerage stocks and the successive surges in ultra-large cap stocks. Secondly, the market has climbed from around 2,000 points last August to about 3,400 points now. The bullish run in heavyweight stocks is mostly over. Over the next period, roughly a month or so, the market will enter a sideways consolidation phase, during which selecting individual stocks will be crucial. Then, starting around mid-February, the market should experience a major wave of thematic and growth enterprise market, GM, stocks entering their main upward trend. This period will be critical for making profits, as most previously trapped stocks will likely break free one after another, and GM stocks will soar to incredible heights. This rally is expected to last until early June. Based on my projections, the broader market could reach around 5,000 points by early June, while GM might hit approximately 4,000 points. Beyond that, it becomes extremely dangerous. The bull market is likely to end by mid-June. Given that this is a leveraged bull run, Once the decline starts, it could trigger margin calls, leading to forced liquidations of retail investor stocks by brokerages. Various funds could then create a stampede effect, wiping out all the wealth accumulated during the entire bull market in an instant. So, uncle, you must sell your stocks by early June or when the index reaches above 5,000 points. That way you can lock in profits and preserve your wealth. Li Yueqi spoke while drawing lines on his chart, leaving the four listeners stunned. How could someone predict the entire bullish market trend at the beginning of the year? But was this for real? Since it hadn't happened yet, no one dared fully believe him. Li Weimin then mentioned several stocks he'd purchased. After a quick review, Li Yueqi noticed most were bought at peak prices. The worst performing was a resource stock, Kaitong Copper, bought around 90 yuan and trapped for 7 years. Li Yueqi privately doubted this stock would ever recover its value. Still, he patiently analyzed, "Uncle, these stocks were all bought during the last bull market and got trapped. Except for Kaitong Copper, the others shouldn't have much trouble breaking even this cycle. But if you want profits, focus on Qin export stocks. As for Kaitong Copper, its price was a product of special historical circumstances. Without a commodities bull market, recouping losses seems nearly impossible. While it might rise a bit more, doubling this year seems unlikely. I estimate Kaitong Copper might reach about 25 yuan by late May or early June. That'll probably be its peak. Of course, these are just my personal analyses, merely one man's opinion, not necessarily correct. I'm just an ordinary person who happened to make some money out of luck. Specific operations still need to be analyzed based on market conditions," Li Yueqi finally said cautiously. Li Weimin and Shun Yuhua listened to their nephew's words without expressing approval or disapproval. They simply nodded slightly and said nothing more. Li Yueqi didn't concern himself with whether his uncle and aunt had taken his advice to heart. He'd said all he could and done his part. Whether they listened or not was no longer his concern. Medicine heals those not fated to die, and Buddha saves those destined for enlightenment. If they disregarded his words, so be it. Li Jianmin and Zhou Xiaoping also found their son's analysis obscure and couldn't gauge its accuracy. But as guests in someone else's home, especially discussing money matters, it was wise for their son to speak cautiously. As dusk fell amidst their conversation, Li Weimin and his wife personally prepared dinner, inviting Li Yueqi's family to stay for the meal. Li Jianmin and Zhou Xiaoping also helped with the cooking. Originally, Li Jianmin had planned to return to Zhongzhou that evening, but after years apart, the two brothers Li Weimin and Li Jianmin drank heavily during the meal, making driving impossible. Thus, they had no choice but to spend the night at Li Weimin's home, only driving back to Zhongzhou the next afternoon. Upon arriving in Zhongzhou, Li Yueqi got out of the car, and Zhou Xiaoping repeatedly reminded him, "The weather's getting colder, or more when you go out. If you have time, tidy up your little place. Don't let it stay so messy all the time. Be careful when learning to drive, and listen to your instructor. Call home often, and tell us right away if you run into trouble. If you meet a nice girl, don't hesitate. Don't wait until it's too late to regret it. Come home early for the Lunar New Year." Listening to his mother's nagging, Li Yueqi felt no annoyance in his heart, knowing that only one's own parents would care for you like this. Others wouldn't bother saying these things. Li Yueqi likewise told his parents, "Drive carefully on the way back, and give me a call when you get home. If anything comes up at home, let me know. If you ever need money, tell me right away. Don't just focus on saving. Buy whatever you want." A mother worries when her son travels 1,000 miles. A son worries equally when his mother journeys far. When a son learns to care for his parents, he truly grows up. Chapter 23. The Great Opportunity in the Growth Enterprise Market. After seeing his parents off, Li Yueqi resumed planning his trading strategy. Over the next month, blue-chip stocks would gradually reseed, giving way to the growth enterprise market starting in early February. However, stocks on the growth enterprise market generally had lower liquidity and smaller market capitalization, making large capital flows cumbersome. Excessive movement could easily alert existing market manipulators, necessitating a more strategic, long-term approach. The plan was quite simple, basically selecting stocks poised for explosive growth in advance and spreading investments across them. Given that this Chinex board rally was a skyrocketing free-for-all where virtually all listed stocks would surge dramatically, the strategy merely involved identifying the fastest rising, highest gaining picks ahead of time, then waiting for the index to double and individual stocks to erupt, triggering a wealth explosion. Each day, a few stocks would be selected based on future projections for portfolio adjustments, maximizing profit potential to the fullest. Li Yueqi promptly picked over a dozen stocks destined for violent surges within the next 10 days, planning quick speculative trades. However, handling nearly 100 million yen in capital, his own 45 million yen, plus 88.6 million yen in leveraged funds, alongside his parents' 20 million yen account and 40 million yen in margin, posed a challenge. The Chinex board's liquidity was generally shallow, even split across a dozen stocks. Trading such volumes risked alerting market makers and hot money traders. Fortunately, the raging bull market meant any suspicion would likely only prompt competitors to front-run and hoard shares, not dump positions to trap retail investors. In this frenzy, if you didn't trade, someone else would. With the Chinex index skyrocketing, nearly every stock was primed for a surge. Even if a few institutions or hot money traders exited, they'd merely forfeit their own profit opportunities. While front-running could drive prices up and make accumulation harder, this posed no real obstacle for Li Yueqi. Armed with future charts, if any stock spiked too quickly to buy into, he could simply abandon it and pivot to others. With nearly 400 stocks on the Chinex board, his selection pool remained vast. The next day was Monday, and a new week began. Li Yueqi liquidated most of his holdings in large-cap stocks, except for China Life Insurance, and started investing in Chinex-listed stocks. The previous evening, he had selected 20 Chinex stocks in total. His stock-picking method disregarded fundamentals like PE ratios and ignored so-called technical analysis. He relied solely on future stock charts to gauge potential gains. This superpower was the very foundation of his stock market profits. He didn't rush to go all in, but gradually built positions in these growth enterprise market stocks, purchasing each one in multiple small batches. Throughout Monday, Li Yueqi bought shares in 12 different stocks, spending approximately 60 million yuan. The reason for not buying everything at once was that the broader market and individual stocks would experience significant fluctuations in the coming weeks, and some of his chosen stocks hadn't yet dropped to their relative lows. After completing these arrangements, he moved on to other tasks. Li Yueqi had line charts. He already knew the closing results in advance, so he rarely waited for the market to close after a day's trading was done. For example, today he had made arrangements with the driving school to register for his driver's license exam training. Around 2 p.m., Li Yueqi arrived at the Iche driving school where he had previously enrolled. He had signed up for the premium executive class, which offered various convenience services, a dedicated instructor available for flexible scheduling, and a pass-guaranteed agreement allowing free retakes if unsuccessful. It focused on the simplest automatic transmission vehicles, minimizing complicated driving drills. The exams were prioritized with lenient grading, essentially doing everything possible to simplify obtaining the license. Upon hearing of Li Yueqi's arrival, the Iche staff immediately sent someone to greet him. They provided an overview of each exam module's format and handed him internal study materials for the theory test, Subject 1. Traditionally, passing the theory exam was required before practical driving lessons. However, the staff assured that Subject 1 questions were exclusively drawn from these materials. Just reviewing them a few times guaranteed success. Next, staff arranged his registration and photo session without any queues, offering a seamless end-to-end service. Finally, they informed him that Subject 1 exams were scheduled on Wednesdays and Saturdays. He needed to call at least 3 days in advance to confirm his slot, then simply show up on exam day. The entire process took just over 20 minutes, truly efficient and hassle-free. When Li Yueqi saw those trainees who had arrived earlier than him, yet were still queuing to register, he couldn't help but sigh inwardly. Having money sure was nice. After leaving the driving school, he glanced through the so-called internal study materials, which turned out to be just a few hundred test questions. All exam questions would be randomly selected from this pool. No wonder the staff had assured him that reviewing them a few times would guarantee a pass. Back at his place, Li Yueqi first reviewed the driving school's internal materials twice. The questions were actually quite simple, covering basic traffic knowledge and regulations. Memorizing them in just a couple of read-throughs was easy. However, with the stock market experiencing heightened volatility recently, he needed to act swiftly. So, he scheduled his driving test for Saturday. On his way back to the guest house, Li Yueqi received a call from Gao Fenghua, Deputy General Manager of Zhongxin Securities Yuzhou branch, requesting a meeting. This was the same Gao Fenghua who had personally handled Li Yueqi's margin trading account opening. Back then, after hearing from account manager Wei Yaij about Li Yueqi's unbelievable monthly returns of over tenfold, Gao had been intrigued enough to meet him in person, only to find the young graduate utterly unremarkable, just a greenhorn fresh out of college. At the time, Gao Fenghua concluded that Li Yueqi's high returns were purely due to luck. Such people were a dime a dozen in the stock market and hardly worth paying attention to. Over the following months, he was sent by the company to the headquarters for training and had just returned to Zhongzhou a few days ago, where he was promoted to General Manager of Yuzhou branch of Zhongxin Securities. This essentially made him a local overlord within the company. A few days ago, Wei Yaij reported on Li Yueqi's situation once again. As of the 9th of this month, the funds in Li Yueqi's account had exceeded 55 million, with leverage positions amounting to 87.6 million and holdings valued at 90 million. And all this was after he had withdrawn 25 million in cash. Taking everything into account, Li Yueqi's current net worth had surpassed 80 million. In just 6 months, Li Yueqi's assets had multiplied by 1,350 times, especially during recent weeks, when his daily trading consistently yielded profits exceeding 10 million yuan, utterly indifferent to market fluctuations. Over this half-year period, he executed over 200 short-term stock trades without incurring a single loss. Every position closed in profit with an astounding average gain of 7%. 6 of these trades doubled his investment, each meticulously liquidated near peak valuations. Seeing these data, Gao Fenghua was utterly shocked and decided to discard his previous prejudices to re-evaluate this newly risen financial prodigy. Chapter 24. Company Registration. Although Li Yueqi had only met this director Gao once before, he still had some impression of him, knowing he was Wei Yaij's superior. However, his impression of director Gao wasn't favorable. During their meeting months ago, the man's tone had carried an air of probing, constantly sizing him up, something Li Yueqi could clearly sense at the time. Though Wei Yaij claimed director Gao personally received Li Yueqi to handle his business matters, the man merely greeted him before leaving, clearly looking down on him. Someone who had dismissed him before suddenly requesting a meeting now. The reason was obvious. It could only be because his astonishing profit-making speed over the past half-year had exceeded their expectations, prompting this sudden shift from coldness to courtesy. Li Yueqi understood this was how society operated. Respect only came with demonstrated capability. But for those who had looked down on him from the start, even if their attitude changed, he had no interest in further interaction. If this Mr. Gao hadn't made that phone call, it might not have mattered. But now that he suddenly showed such interest in meeting, it meant he was already fully aware of Li Yueqi's trading operations and profit records over the past 6 months. This realization made Li Yueqi feel disgusted with Zhongxin Securities. His account manager had casually leaked his private information to superiors. Although he knew this was an unspoken rule among brokerage firms, the fact that they brazenly brought it up showed sheer disregard for his boundaries. This only strengthened his determination to establish his own investment company. Starting a company was no simple task, especially for a financial investment firm, particularly since Li Yueqi had little understanding of the procedures. He went straight to the Business Registration Service Center at the administrative office to inquire about the general details of company registration. To register a financial investment company, one needed at least 1 million yuan in registered capital, a property as an official office address, and third-party verification of the capital and asset valuation. There was, however, one exception: submitting the full registered capital in cash for complete payment up front would expedite the approval process significantly. Upon learning these details, Li Yueqi didn't hesitate for a second. He directly poured out 10 million yuan in cash to fully subscribe to the registered capital. He named the company Miracle Capital, From childhood, Li Yueqi's favorite word had always been miracle. His understanding of a miracle was extraordinary events, uncommon achievements, remarkable accomplishments. He firmly believed that his own rise was, in itself, a miracle, and in the future, he intended to create even more miracles. The staff at the Administration for Industry and Commerce informed him that for companies like his that fully pay the registered capital, the entire approval process would only take about 3 days. Someone would notify him of the registration results by then. Li Yueqi was thrilled. He knew how difficult it typically was to register a company, how many trips and favors it usually required. Yet here he was, getting everything done in just one visit. It seemed money really could make anything possible. After leaving the Administration for Industry and Commerce, Li Yueqi headed to Zhongzhou's financial hub, the Financial New District. This area not only housed the highest concentration of financial enterprise branch headquarters in the province, but also hosted China's largest agricultural and sideline product futures trading center. Zhongzhou's financial center had traditionally been located in the older district, such as where the Gaoshan company he once worked for is situated near Jingsan Road. However, in recent years, the financial center had been steadily shifting eastward, with many influential financial firms relocating to the high-tech zone. Naturally, his company had to be registered in the Financial New District as well. Li Yueqi took a ride-share to the Financial New District, searching online for office space rentals in the high-tech zone along the way. After touring several office buildings, he still hadn't found one that suited him. But since night was falling and the Financial New District was quite a distance from the guest house where he was staying, he decided not to go back and instead booked a hotel room in the Financial New District to spend the night, planning to continue his search for office space the next morning. By the time he checked in, it was already past 6 in the evening. As it was midwinter, darkness fell early, but he still decided to take a stroll through the Financial New District under the night sky to experience the nightlife of the high-tech zone. Property prices in the Financial New District were exorbitant, beyond the means of many white-collar workers and even company executives. The streets were bustling with pedestrians, most of whom were clearly workers hurrying under the cover of night toward the old city district. These seemingly polished individuals, dressed in suits and leather shoes, who could truly understand the hardships behind their polished exteriors. Just half a year ago, Li Yueqi had been one of these very workers. He knew their lives all too well, exhausting every ounce of effort to please bosses, throwing themselves into their work, only to see the bulk of their earnings vanish into rent. After a month of hard labor, they barely had enough left beyond the basics of food, clothing, and shelter. How many of those who burned through their youth in this glittering, extravagant place would ultimately build a family of their own? If he hadn't been lucky enough to obtain software that could see the future, he might not have fared any better than them. Perhaps after being fired by Goldman Sachs, he would have directly returned to his hometown to live off his parents. Lost in endless contemplation, Li Yueqi walked up to a building called Weiye Plaza when suddenly a woman rushed out and collided head-on with him, crashing right into his arms. The woman immediately apologized. Sorry. I was in a hurry and didn't see you. Are you okay?" Though slightly annoyed, Li Yueqi hadn't even spoken when he found her face vaguely familiar. He asked, "Have we met before?" The woman also looked up and glanced at him. "Ah, who are you?" "Li Yueqi." Recognizing that she had identified him, Li Yueqi suddenly remembered. Wasn't this his university class monitor, Peng Xiaolin? Peng Xiaolin looked at Li Yueqi with a hint of pleasant surprise and asked, "Old classmate, what brings you here?" "I came here to take care of some business. Seeing how late it got, I decided not to go back and booked a hotel instead." "What about you? Do you work here?" "Yeah, I've already been working at this company for 6 months. You haven't eaten yet, have you? Let's go find a restaurant. I'll treat you to dinner as an apology for bumping into you earlier." "Forget it, class president. Don't you have somewhere urgent to be? Maybe we can talk another time if there's a chance." Who throws someone out like this? Old classmates reuniting and having a meal together. What's the big deal? I rushed because I couldn't find an excuse and didn't want to worry my mom. Now that I'm dining with a classmate, she'll be at ease. Li Yueqi then realized that Peng Xiaolin was originally from Zhongzhou City. "All right then, but let me treat you instead. It wouldn't be right to have a girl pay for the meal. If word got out, my classmates would probably give me an earful about it." That works, but I'll choose the place. About 150 meters ahead, there's a decent Western restaurant. How about we grab a bite there? Sure, you know this area better. I'll follow your lead. Chapter 25, Leasing an Office Building. Chapter 25, Leasing an Office Building. Li Yueqi and Peng Xiaolin arrived at a Western restaurant called Flake. He let the girl order first, and Peng Xiaolin, familiar with the place, smoothly selected 2 Vienna steaks and 2 Mediterranean-style pasta before handing the menu to Li Yueqi. After a glance, Li Yueqi added a Chinese-style beef soup and a hot drink. Feeling it was enough, he signaled the waiter to proceed. Only then did Li Yueqi have the chance to take a closer look at the girl across from him. Dressed in a cream-white down jacket over professional attire, coupled with her poised and elegant demeanor, she exuded the spirited confidence of a career-driven woman. Back in their university days, Peng Xiaolin had been the class monitor for Finance Class 1, possessing a gentle exterior but a strong will, handling daily affairs with remarkable finesse. Her ability to become class monitor stemmed from exceptional social skill. She could remember anyone after just one meeting. This made her incredibly adept at networking, seemingly able to connect effortlessly with every classmate. While many male students had tried to pursue her during university, whenever someone attempted to get closer, she subtly made them realize just how unattainable she truly was. Li Yueqi had a relatively introverted personality, and during university, his interactions with Peng Xiaolin were actually quite limited. At most, they would exchange a few words during class activities or meetings. With over 80 students in Finance Class 1, the fact that she could recognize him at a glance more than half a year after graduation spoke volumes about her social skills and memory. Class monitor, you must be doing pretty well after graduation, right? Just SOSO. University life was an ivory tower. It wasn't until I stepped into the real world that I realized how tough society is. I work in finance at a tax registration company, facing endless reports and data every day. The bits of knowledge I learned in college are practically useless in the job. It's all just office politics. A small company with barely 20 people somehow manages to split into several competing factions. As a newcomer, I can't afford to offend anyone, so I end up taking heat from all sides. Yeah, when I think back to our student days, I really miss the happiness of those times. Don't just focus on me, old classmate. Tell me about yourself. I heard you were taking the civil service exam with great results, but what are you doing here now? What's been going on in the past 6 months? Peng Xiaolin asked openly. Li Yueqi replied indifferently. Failed the civil service exam. Someone pulled strings to take my spot. After graduation, I took a job but got fired during probation. Didn't want to work for others anymore. So I've been holed up in my tiny place, trading stocks for over half a year. Recently been thinking about starting my own business. Peng Xiaolin listened to Li Yueqi's story. A college grad spending over half a year trading stocks, and a flicker of surprise flashed in her eyes. She froze for a long moment, lost in thought. Peng Xiaolin asked softly, "Stock trading? How's the return? I heard it's been a bull market lately. Profits must be pretty good, right?" Li Yueqi knew she was just making small talk, as in many people's eyes, young people dabbling in stocks was simply not a proper occupation. So he replied indifferently, just so, barely scraping by. In this market, anyone could make money, but who knows how long it'll last. The 2007 bull market ended up as a complete mess, didn't it? Peng Xiaolin let out an "oh" and didn't say anything more, quietly cutting the steak on her plate. Li Yueqi didn't speak another word either. Both finished the meal in silence. The beef soup served at the end remained untouched as they hastily wrapped things up. After the meal, Peng Xiaolin added him on WeChat, exchanged a few polite remarks, and then hurriedly left. Li Yueqi watched the woman leave. He had known her type since college, so her departure didn't stir much emotion in him. Women like her only worshiped the strong. They would only yield or submit to someone superior to themselves. Towards men weaker than her, she wouldn't even spare a glance. No hurry. If he were to establish a company here later, there would be opportunities for future encounters. After spending the night at the hotel, Li Yueqi used his phone the next day to continue buying stocks on the growth enterprise market while adjusting his portfolio, increasing his position to about 70%. Honestly, with the recent high-level fluctuations in the broader market, there wasn't much room for maneuvering. Yet he'd still managed around 5% returns yesterday, and if today went smoothly, his profit margin wouldn't fall below 5% either. Once the trades were completed, he transferred another 10 million yuan in cash from his account to prepare for paying registration capital and renting office space. Li Yueqi checked out of the hotel and continued his search for office space in the financial district's commercial buildings. Zhongzhou's financial district was discreetly developed under the political risk taken by two previous municipal leaders, initially mocked by the media as a ghost town due to low corporate occupancy. Later, with Zhongzhou's economic growth, numerous financial and tech companies moved into the eastern financial district, driving property prices and office rental costs skyward. Yesterday, Li Yueqi had shortlisted two promising office locations from the financial district's official real estate webpage and planned to inspect both today. First, he visited Tongda Business Tower, the tallest building in the financial district, where the property manager received him and briefed him on current leasing availability. Preferring exclusivity over shared office floors, Li Yueqi sought to lease an entire tier, approximately 6,800 square meters per floor. Though the tower's occupancy rate was high, only the 44th and 56th floors remained vacant, as their unlucky numerical associations deterred business tenants. He decided to explore another option, Xinqing Tower. There, the leasing officer explained the situation mirrored Tongda's. Most premium floors were taken, leaving only fragmented availability on the 44th, 47th, and 59th floors, each spanning 4,500 square meters. Li Yueqi couldn't be bothered to browse further and directly decided to lease the entire 59th floor. After negotiating with the property manager, they settled on a final price of 2 yuan per square meter per day, with a management fee of 10 yuan per square meter per month. Once everything was agreed upon, the Xinqing representative led him to finalize the contracts. It took a full 3 hours of reviewing and signing stacks of documents. Li Yueqi skimmed through the various clauses, aware that as a non-professional and loan operator, he was bound to miss countless hidden terms. Getting shortchanged was practically inevitable. But he didn't have time to dwell on that now. Securing the office space came first. Only then could he notify the Industrial and Commercial Bureau to register his company. So he signed only a 1-year lease, figuring he could hash things out with Xinqing Tower's management and property teams later once he'd assembled a legal team. The annual cost came to a staggering 4.19 million yuan, more than Li Yueqi could pay up front. They compromised on semi-annual rent payments, which the other party readily accepted, though with the stipulation that payments be made 1 month in advance and termination notices also given 1 month ahead. After nodding in agreement, Li Yueqi promptly paid 6 months' rent and management fees. With everything settled, Li Yueqi stood on the 59th floor gazing outward when he suddenly noticed, quite coincidentally, that Peng Xiaolin's tax firm office building was located directly across the street from Xinqing Tower.